102.5.
You're listening to the mother of all talk shows, Alhaji And Alhaji. We're live on our affiliates across the country. We are live on GFM Radio in London. We are live on RadioGo905.com. Unfortunately, we are unable to do the Facebook streaming today because of some difficulties. So you'd have to listen to us using the internet radio, or you'd have to depend on our affiliates and also on the power that Radio Go 905, 90.5, and the internet is Radio Go 905.com. Welcome, and don't forget the show is probably brought to you by Franco Trading Enterprise, Kulun Ghana Limited, and TT Brothers. And before I reintroduce the topic and my panel for today, the management of Franco Trading Enterprise wishes to inform the general public that the ongoing promotion on some WhatsApp platforms in relation to phone top-up for an iPhone is a scam. Thus, we advise that the general public should desist from giving monies to any unauthorized persons, either by mobile money or cash, in act of getting a brand new phone. Now, please report such incidents to the nearest police station or call 0302-225-651 or 0246-422-338 or 0247-033-429 for further information. And also, we have this announcement coming in from the office of Nana Sako Brimpon V, who is Nifahini of Santo Kofi traditional area. And the announcement is that the Santo Kofi Benua Development Association, in conjunction with the chiefs and people of Santo Kofi Benua, wish to inform all citizens, both home and abroad, of the 2018 Homecoming fundraising Deba in aid of completion of the proposed ICT Resource Center in Santo Kofi Benua. Now, the activities that will be undertaken during the Homecoming will start on 22nd December 2018. In the morning, there will be a visit to Olekpo. 23rd December 2018, there will be prayers, all churches. 24th December 2018, on 23rd December 2018, there will be prayers for all churches in the morning. And then there will be a video show. On 24th December 2018, there will be cleanup and health screening, and then there will be candlelight procession. On 25th December 2018, there will be a grand deba in the morning. There will be Bobobo night in the evening. 26th December 2018, there will be football gala or other games, including Ludo, cards, among others. That will be in the afternoon. And don't forget that 25th December 2018 is the grand deba. Venue is the EP Church School Park, Santo Kofi Benua. Time 9 a.m. Building theme is building a future for our community. All friends are cordially invited. That is coming from Nana Sako Brimpon the 5th, who is Nimfahining of Santo Kofi traditional area. And that's the announcement coming from him. And if you just joined us once again, Mother of All Talk Show, Alhaji And Alhaji. And my name is Senanombo. It's produced by Patrick Asford. We're working on getting you our live streaming on Facebook. As and when we are able to do that, you can watch us live on Facebook, on Pub MCGH, and also get to share your thoughts with us about the topics we'll be discussing. Now, joining me in the studio for the discussion today is Comrade Kwesi Prajini, who is managing editor of the Inside newspaper. Honorable Edwin Nilante Van Der Poy is Member of Parliament for Dodo Diodio and former Minister of Youth and Sports. Comrade Mutala Ibrahim Mohammed is a former Member of Parliament for Nantong and Deputy Minister of Trade and Industry. And Abdul Nasser Alidu is Communications Director for the Guzitano 2020 campaign. He is a lecturer at Ashesi University too, and a member of Organizing for Ghana. He has joined us today on the program. And of course, today we'll be talking about the brouhaha surrounding the filing fees and cost of nominations form announced by the General Secretary of the National Democratic Congress, Johnson Asiedu Nketia, as part of the guidelines for the presidential primaries of the party as it prepares to elect a flag bearer from the 2020 elections. And then we'll do a critical analysis of the current energy crisis in the country and government's commitment to resolving the challenges and other matters. And if we still have time, we will talk about the Supreme Court verdict on the creation of additional 6 regions and related matters. So those are our topics for today. So we start with the very first one that's having to do with the NDC's announcement of opening nominations for their presidential primaries. And the big issue has been the cost of their filing fees and the nomination forms. So we start with Member of Parliament for Dodo, Honorable Edwin Nilante van der Poy. Honorable, good morning.
Good morning, Senior. How are you?
I'm fine.
And let me say good morning to Senior Comrade Kwesi Pratt and my brother Abdul Nazar Aledu. Yadi. Okay. But I don't know why you were calling Kwesi Comrade and calling Mutala Comrade and leaving me out.
And me too.
Well, I don't know. I don't need to identify myself as comrade, but I'm a comrade.
Okay.
And Kwesi knows that I'm a comrade.
I'll make the necessary correction.
Comrades are people who were born out of the traditional CPP ideology, that people who believe in the ideals of, Nkrumahism. And I was privileged to have been born into that family. My father was a strong CPP guy until the great alliance of NDC and NCP. So I would say I'm a comrade. And I'm also a comrade of the revolution. I was part of the revolution and a senior kid too. So when you call my younger brother Mutala a comrade and you leave me out, I become worried because I think I'm a senior comrade. If I don't take the seniority from Kwesi Pratt, then I don't know. Mutala shouldn't take it from me. Anyway, that is just by the way to say thank you very much for inviting me to this very important program. I want to say yes. The NDC as an institution has come out with what is required of them in order to be able to create the sort of vehicle that will be able to allow them to elect a leader who will be leading the party into a very important election like the 2020 election. And as such, what the NDC would want to do is to create the sort of environment that will make it impossible for them to be able to hold a very, let me say, conducive, convenient, and a very harmonious Congress. Certain people have critiqued the sort of Congress we had recently to elect national executive members. People are talking about why should you bring everybody to one place, the convenience of the place, the number of days which was spent. And I think born out of that, the national executive have learned a lesson and say that this particular one, it will be much more convenient and much more appropriate for us to hold it in the various constituencies of the country to afford the grassroots of the party the opportunity to elect the leader they will want to lead them into the elections. This comes with costs. You should understand, in this country of ours, political parties do not generate any source of income. The only source of revenue for the political parties are the membership dues that people pay from the various branches. In NDC, since the reorganization program, we started a program where people pay 1 cedi. And even that one, let me tell you, in some constituencies, it is difficult for those people to be able to pay the 1 cedi. Because most of the people, the economy is hard, so hard that people cannot even afford 1 cedi. There are some people who, if they should get 1 cedi a day, will sing hallelujah to my Almighty God. So it's difficult for people to even get a 1 cedi. So it becoming almost impossible for political parties to be able to effectively embark upon any program on their own, which require a certain level of resource. I'm very positive of contribution of certain individuals to the maintenance and the running of the party for some time now. For example, as a member of parliament, I pay out of my meager salary some contribution to the running of the party every month. And I also pay something every quarter to maintain the regional offices. You understand? So I'm contributing. So let's take it without admitting that somebody like me, if since 2017, January, I've been contributing 1,000 cedis every month to the party. You understand? By this time, calculate how much I've contributed to the running of the party. And then somebody wants to be the flag bearer of the party. And you are saying that that person should come in and pay an amount that is convenient to him. I think it comes with cost. Democracy is a very expensive exercise. What we should be doing as individuals and as politicians is to think about making people own our political campaigns. One of the easiest way I have always said, of making people become conscious of the leadership role they be assigned, is to let them understand that their power and the authority and the position they are holding emanates from the people. You understand? If other jurisdiction, people will always want to raise money. As a member of parliament, I contesting as a parliamentarian, I went around shops in Zongo Lane, friends, individuals, to raise money. Because I couldn't afford myself to print all the t-shirts. I couldn't afford on my own to be able to organize some of the rallies and things. Sometimes somebody come and say, look, nee, I'm contributing this, I'm giving you water, I'm giving you this, I'm giving you this. I think it's important that where we have gotten to, individuals who want to aspire to a very strong position, like a flag bearer of a party, should have the sort of network and ability to be able to get through to the grassroots and the people to contribute. If the person contributes to your campaign, the person is committed both religiously and also morally to making sure that you are successful. So that if tomorrow I go there and say I'm contesting flag bearership, and I could get all the people to contribute 5 cities, to contribute 2 cities. I could get people in Namtong, people in Ayawaso North, Kwesi Pratt constituency, to contribute to my campaign. Those people hold a duty and a responsibility to work assiduously for me to be successful, so that they will have a meaning and a reflection of their contribution. If it should always be that people will sit down and say that this amount is too, whatever amount is stated will be too much for one person or the other, because we don't have equal means and equal levels of resources. I think the party did a very good analysis, and I didn't have the breakdown. I will have given you the breakdown on my phone. I'm just having. Let's take, for example, just one activity. The Electoral Commission will be responsible for the conduct of the elections in all the 275 constituencies. The Electoral Commission charges not less than 3,000 per this exercise in every constituency. So if you are calculating even that one, 275 times 3, you are talking about almost about 700 something thousand Ghana cedis. So even if Mutala and I contributing 420 each, the two of us, our contribution alone is gone. It's gone. You understand? The party now has to look for where to raise money to transport and to feed all the about 300,000 delegates across the country. You understand me? Per constituencies. Some of the constituencies, let me take you, for example, if you go to the northern part of the country, Salaga East, Salaga North, you talk about a constituency like Tuna Kalba, Saula, you talk a constituency be like Yagabakubori. Some people will make a journey of about an hour or 2 hours to be able to reach the constituency center where the exercise will be conducted. In fact, if you go to places like Salaga itself, somebody will have to cross from the northern region, come through the Brongafo in order to access where the election will be conducted. All this cost. And who are you expecting to bear that cost? The party? The party which has no source of revenue, the party which has no source of income. Where's the party going to get that money from? Or the party should go and borrow from the bank with interest and come and conduct the elections. And how would the party be able to pay back these monies to the bank and the interest? We don't want to do what we've had some time ago in our political history, where people borrowed money from banks like Prudential Bank and the rest. And they've come to power. And so they have to squeeze everything, squeeze water out of stone to go and pay those monies. When people thought that they've financed people's campaigns and has collapsed their businesses, so now that they have the opportunity, they should do everything possible, collapse other businesses, make their business so strong and so giant, and monopolize every aspect of money in order to resuscitate and to revive their businesses. We will not want to do that. We will want to do a Congress where those people who are contributing, if I think that I will want to lead the NDC into the elections in 2020, I should be strong enough to say that, look, I can raise this money. Because after you've been elected as a flag bearer, you have the honest responsibility of also raising money for the conduct of the elections. So if you cannot even raise money to pay for your filing fee, what guarantees are you giving us that you'll be able to raise that much money to lead us to the elections in terms of providing paraphernalia and other logistics that the party will need to conduct a very successful and effective campaign? So it is not easy. I know that some people terribly are worried about this. Some people have made all sort of disparaging comments about it. I wouldn't want to go into that because I think totally unnecessary. And somebody is also saying that the amount, looking at the time, some time ago, 4 years ago, the amount which was paid, definitely, the MPP government has made conditions in Ghana so hard and so difficult that what you paid 4 years ago, realistically, cannot, even if it is doubled or tripled, cannot make any meaningful impact today. Ghana's condition has worsened over the past 3 to 4 years, especially at least last 2 years. So much that it is going to be difficult for you to say that the amount of money that was paid 4 years ago should be paid today or even doubled. It doesn't make any sense because cost of living has become worse almost about 300%. So if we're going to make realistic demands on people, I've just broken down to you even 2 activities for the election. I've not talked about ballot papers. I've not taken about the amount you have to pay for security personnel. I've not talked about all this. I've not talking about the hiring of venues for this function, the public address systems that have to be hired. I've not talked about refreshment for the delegates who will be coming and have to be sitting down from morning till evening when they will be casting their vote. Because some countries, I have 176 branches. 176 branches. If they should all assemble at a place, it means that the voting cannot end even before 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, so that you say that the person can go home and go and find something to eat. It means that those provisions must be made for the people because some of them are going to stay and vote after about 6 o'clock. Because when we had our last constituency executive elections, we started in the morning at 9, we ended around 7 o'clock in the evening. So it's the same reflection that possibly we'll be having with these presidential elections. So it is important for us to look at the variables involved in constituting this cost, and not just to look at the figure and think that it's astronomical, it's prohibitive, it's not going to afford people the opportunity to also contribute meaningfully. I think at this moment in time, all the people who have expressed interest, who has given letter of intent to contest this flag bearership, I believe they are people who have evaluated themselves. Like J.H. Mention said, Oma check your moho. And they've come to the conclusion that we are able. I thank God that over the past 48 hours, scanning through social media and I've seen that almost all of them are making wonderful fundraising activities to be able to raise the necessary contribution to support. I have heard that, for example, the Aswanse NDC coming out to say that they are going to pay for the 20,000 for John Dramani Mahama. I've also heard that former chairman of Ashaman constituency has said that he's going to pay half of the contribution. And I've also heard that some people are already lined up at John Mahama's office asking that they are ready to pay. This morning, I've heard that there's a queue in front of his office. Ordinary people of the party from Ladedoko Topon and other constituencies closer to his office asking that they should be allowed, they are holding their 2 cedis, 5 cedis, 10 cedis, 20 cedis to pay for John Mahama. I think all the candidates should do that. And I'm very sure that if they are really strong on the ground, as some of them have wanted us to believe, they will be able to raise those monies within a day or two. Because if you can, even if you are saying that 1 cedi, this people should come and give me 1 cedi, 400,000 people, mean 3 constituencies in Accra will be able, for each person, each party member giving 1 cedi. 4 constituencies in Greater Accra region will be able to give you the 420,000 you are looking for to be able to file and contest peacefully. This will be my initial comment on this particular issue.
Thank you very much. You heard Honorable Edwin Nilante van der Poy, and if you just join us, you're listening to the Mother of All Talk Shows, Alhaji and Alhaji, and we are talking about the opening of nominations by the National Democratic Congress for their presidential primaries. Well, let's move to somebody who is directly involved in the flag bearership, the flag bearership elections, actually, because he speaks for one of the persons who have declared an intent to contest the elections when nominations are open. Alidu, Abdul Nasser Halidu. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
And good
you know, the way Comrade Mustafa, Mutala is calling me, tells you he's known me for a long while. All right. You want to hear my initial thoughts on this?
Your thoughts on our topic.
Okay, so I think
not initial, your thoughts.
My thoughts. Yeah. Okay, so I think Honorable Nilante van der Poel has made very strong arguments for the announcement that was made, and then for the 420,000 cedis that has been cited as the amount that candidates need to pay. But I have a few. I don't completely agree on everything. Of course, there are some of them that I agree. The fact that Ghana has become hard, we all know that Ghana has become hard, and we are all trying to make it through that. But I'll first address a few issues that Honorable Nilante raised, and then I'll go to my substantive points about this issue. So first, I think you talked about the fact that the party is not able to raise the money, right? And this is going to be an expensive venture. It, of course, is going to be an expensive venture. I mean, conducting an election in all 275 constituencies is an expensive venture. And I'm sure even bringing everybody to the Trade Fair Center for the recent NEC elections was not a small joke. So it is an expensive venture. But then it is also dangerous, right, to then say, because this is an expensive venture, it needs to be financed by people who are at the top, and that the ordinary persons in the party do not have the ability to contribute to the party. Now, saying the ordinary people in the party do not have the ability to contribute to the party essentially is saying you're leaving the funding of the party to a few people at the very top. And this is, I mean, whatever be the case, this is what breeds the politics of patronage that we have seen in Ghana today, right? This is what breeds the politics that ensures that the people who have financed the party, or the few people who have financed the party, are the ones that are calling the shots, that are getting the contracts, and that are doing all the things that they need to do in order to recoup their finances. If an individual, if you say an individual should be able to raise that money, then the political party should have even the bigger machinery to be able to raise that money. For a political party like the NDC, which is the biggest opposition party in Ghana, which has been in government in more times than any other political party in Ghana, to at this stage say they do not have the ability to raise the money to fund their elections, basically it does not make sense. Because the party, if a party that is matured or that has gone through all of this, should at this stage know how it will raise the money. You don't wait to now to say, I don't have the money, and so the few people who are contesting should be the ones to do. So that's number one. Then he also mentioned that the flag bearers, I mean, if you want to be a flag bearer, it's not a joke, and so you should be in a position to also fund the party. You should be in a position. I mean, saying that seems to suggest that the flag bearer position is like an award, right? You are awarding, it's like an auction. You are awarding something to them. You are giving them a certain. The position of the flag bearer should be one that is for service, where people take up, people have ideas, they are ready to serve the country, and you give them an opportunity to serve the country. It's not one where you sell it to people and people come to buy so that they go and, of course, the very thing that you talked about, which is currently people mortgaging their businesses and all of that and now trying to recoup it, is the very same thing that you are, by your analysis, is going to happen in the NDC. Because what you are saying is people, a few people should be able to go and get the money and come because, well, you are giving them a privilege to become a flag bearer. When it's in a sense, you are giving people who have the ideas to be able to serve the party. And that's what it should be. Now, to a few, to some of my substantive points, I actually have 4 points on this one. The first one is the unreasonableness of the fees and how that is not in consonance with the traditions and the beliefs of the NDC. The NDC is supposed to be a social democratic party, right? And I heard our General Secretary say, well, social democracy is not equal to poverty. Of course, social democracy is not equal to poverty, right? But what then, and then also, of course, went ahead to equate what we are doing and said, well, if the MPP charged 500K, we should be able to charge 420,000, right? Of course, the MPP says they didn't charge 500,000, and we all know they did not charge. But even if they did, right, the NDC is a social democratic party. The MPP say they believe in property-owning democracy. We should not be equating ourselves to them. They are not our yardstick. They are not the yardstick by which you determine how much people need to pay in NDC. And when asked the question, or when told that it is unreasonable, what the General Secretary said was, what is reasonable? And I think Honorable Neelanti also mentioned what is reasonable. You can find a reasonable measure to determine these things. And there are several, I can give you some examples of how to do this. Right. So essentially, you have a political party that has a certain membership, and you want to ensure that you are giving equal opportunity for everybody to aspire to the topmost positions within the party. One way of determining the filing fee could be to look at what are the income levels of the people, right? How many people do you have? What is the average income level? How much can you afford? How much can you make? Can you peg this at to ensure that the average person within the party can aspire to that party, to that position? If you want it to be fair, that's one. Number two, you can look at the emoluments of the position that they are aspiring to. President, we all know how much the president receives in Ghana. Right? If you want to ensure that this is something that you are doing so people have a reasonable chance of being able to recoup whatever they've put in, you can also look at the emoluments, and based on what the emoluments of the position being aspired to, set something like this. Right? You can look at precedent. There is precedent. You can look at what the NDC has done in the past. That provides you precedent to look at, okay, in the past, this is what was done. And a very good precedent is even in selecting the NEC. The chairmanship position, I don't know, was it 10,000 cedis or something around that? If the chairman of the party, right, who is the leader when we're in opposition, right, if for that position, and who is supposed to, of course, the chairman and the general secretary, they are ones running the party. And they are the ones that you would expect would be able to help the party fund its activities. If you requested that they pay 10,000 cedis and 8,000 or 6,000 cedis, why would the flag bearer have to pay 420,000 cedis? That's completely out of whack. So the issue is not the fact that one candidate or the other cannot pay, but the issue is pegging it at 420,000 cedis completely takes it out of the reach of the ordinary members of the party. Essentially, you are saying the party, the flag bearer position is not for anybody in the party, it's for the few who have the money and who can afford to take up that position. That's essentially what you are saying. Now, just moving away from the 420,000 cedis, and of course, I'm sure you've heard all the talk in the media today about, how a social democratic party can peg their fees at this. What I would say is, we need to also be mindful of our roots, and we need to be consistent with our own ideology. So if you're doing things, you need to be consistent with your ideology. If we say we are social democratic, we need to provide opportunities for people within the society. We need to provide opportunities for everybody to aspire to the top position. Now, moving away from the 420,000 cedis, we can talk about the schedule of the elections also. And that's also a very curious position. So we have about 50 days in all for this whole process to take place, right? 2 days for the picking up of forms, 10 days for the endorsement. And then, now when you realize it, by the time the endorsement is completed, that'll be around December 15th, most people would have broken for Christmas. So essentially, there's no opportunity to campaign again, right? And immediately we come back from the Christmas break, it's getting ready to go for election. So essentially, there's a certain haste to conclude things very quickly, right, and get this thing done by January 19th. When, in fact, the amendment at the recent Congress has allowed us to go all the way to March, I think March 7th, to conduct this. The process needs to be able to provide everybody an opportunity to be able to pick up their forms, raise the money that you're requesting for them to raise, and get the endorsement that they need to do, right? During the NEC elections, they were provided 6 weeks to get the endorsement, and that's a less bureaucratic process. That's actually a less complicated process than the kind of endorsement that the presidential candidates have to. So they got 6 weeks. The presidential candidates get 10 weeks to do a more intricate and a more bureaucratic process of endorsement, right? And the question is, why the haste? Why not give them time? We are going into a Christmas break. Why not give it time and be able to do this? February, you have up to March 7th, and especially if you say there is no money to conduct this, let's give the process time so that we can raise money to get this done, right? The NDC is, I strongly believe that the NDC is the hope for this country, right? The NDC is the party that can save this country for where we are today. And if that is the case, we need to ensure that we are building a strong NDC, and we are building an NDC that gives an opportunity to everybody, and not an NDC that's, just you're just looking at ticking the boxes and getting things done without necessarily completely thinking through all of the issue. I think I'll end here. I see Honorable has made some notes. I'll end here and then we'll talk. No, we can talk about that, and that's the thing. We need to have
sometimes very contradictory positions.
No, they are not. We can talk about them, and these are well thought out positions, and that we need to have the difficult conversations.
Don't worry, we all have a chance to discuss the issues you have raised, and we will see the obvious contradictions in what you have said.
Absolutely,
so obvious.
I'm so happy to debate you on that. Because I think the process should be, we need to get to a point where we need to debate, not to win, but to enlighten each other. And I'm happy to hear what you have to say.
Fantastic.
We heard Abdul Nasser Alidu. He is a communications director for the Guzitano 2020 campaign. And Mutara.
Well, let me say good morning to your cherished listeners. Today, unfortunately, we don't have viewers following except those who would listen through the internet. And of course, my two senior, comrades and a kid brother of mine. Naza and I are not just friends, we are brothers. We have come a long way. And it's elating to see such a sharp guy now joining the field. Naza has been an NDC person since I knew him, but he wasn't in the thick of NDC's affairs. So I'm happy that the likes of Naza are getting engaged. It means that
a lot more than this time.
Yes, so it means that the NDC
very, very
absolutely
attractive.
The NDC is getting so attractive, and I think that kudos to the party machinery and those who are leading the party, contrary to the views espoused by my brother today about the fact that the NDC is virtually becoming like the MPP. But let's also begin to appreciate the whole concept of social democracy, because I have listened to a lot of commentary that is being made, and it is not for nothing that the General Secretary said that social democracy doesn't mean poverty. I think that we need to take time to find out the principle that governs social democratic governance. Indeed, if you ask me whether 400,000 Ghana citizens under the prevailing deprivation and economic circumstance, I would agree with you that yes, 400,000 may seem to be too much, considering the fact that everybody has acknowledged the fact that the economy, we are in the most unprecedented, difficult and challenging times economically. So to that extent, all the aspirants, if you ask them, they would have to find a novelty ways of generating the money. I really don't think that any of them would just tell you that I can just go and dip my hands in my bag and bring out 400,000. But let us not misconstrue and misconstrive what social democracy is all about. In a typical social democratic political persuasion, even ideologically, if you have few who can afford to be able to take care of the collective, that is what social democracy even entreats. That if you have few people, assuming they can all afford, that they are being charged to pay 400,000, even 1 million Ghana cedis each, so that it can serve the good of the collective. That is what social democracy is all about. The difficulty in appreciating this is that some looked at it just the amount of money, but without looking at what it is going, the purpose is going to serve. So what I would say is that yes, 400,000 Ghana cedis seem to be very high. There is no denying that fact. But on condition that people cannot afford. But if those who are being asked to pay the money can afford that. And I would also want to remind my brother Naza to understand one thing, that we should begin contextualizing this discourse and finding out how much do they need to run that particular elections. That is one thing we need to. My understanding and the rough estimates that I have seen, they need over 11 million Ghana cedis, over almost 12 million Ghana cedis to conduct this exercise. Let us also understand, and my senior comrade Nilante, indeed, and if espouse that strongly, that we are having an election that has never been held anywhere in this country by any political party. We have never had a political party that would have an election which involved several thousands, over 300,000 delegates who would have to be converged at a particular place to determine who leads them as the flag bearer for the NDC. Now, if we have all agreed, and the aspirants, including my brother Naz's, candidate, have all agreed that that is the way to go. That at no point in time did any of them raise a finger about the fact that the NDC has decided to change their electoral college and to have a way of choosing leaders in a form that we have it today. None of them has ever raised a finger or concern about the fact that expanding the electoral college is something that will pose some difficulty. Now, if you never raise any finger, expand it further. So granted,
every registered member of the party must vote.
So that is the consequences. That when you are in extreme realities, you need extreme resolutions. I've also listened to another commentary that the party is not, resourceful. Political parties are not meant to make money. Let's get that very clearly. Except that someone is telling me that the moment you have a political party that wins an elections, it is expected that that political party in government must make money. From where? The only way a political party can make money is through the contributions of members. 1. 2, except that people are suggesting that we should begin robbing the state as a political party once we assumed the mantle of leadership of this country. If we have all agreed that political parties can only raise money, first and foremost, from contributions of members, and 2, from other opportunities and what do they call it? Initiatives and plans they put in place. And in that instant, the people who are contesting are not insulated. The people who are contesting, all the others, from President Mahama to all the candidates, have a moral duty and a responsibility. What ways have they suggested to the NDC before they intended to contest for the leadership of the party, that these are the ways we think that we can generate money? Because the idea of the inability of the party to undertake certain projects and the difficulty therein didn't start today. Mr. Guzitano, Honorable Bagbin, Honorable Dr. Spiugabra, my former minister, Honorable Spiugabra, all of them, they have all been with the NDC, and they all knew the challenges the NDC have been facing over the years, including President Mahama, with regards to our inability to execute certain projects because the party doesn't seem to be that, if you like, so resourcefulness that we are indeed demanding the political party. What have they each done individually to ensure that we find ways of generating money for the party? So today, for me, I see it a bit hypocritical if you want to turn around and say that the party ought to be resourceful. What role have you played as a candidate, as a member of the NDC, and ensuring that that resourcefulness of the party doesn't become a problem? I don't think that, if they did, I think that it is important for them to tell us that this was what we did. We made these suggestions, we made this move to ensure that the party has a means by which we can generate money, we can be more resourceful, so that we can take care of some of the challenges that we face today. So that is another aspect of it. So clearly, let's understand what social democracy is all about. And 2, let us also understand that we have all agreed collectively as a political party that we want to expand the electoral college, and expanding the electoral college comes with a cost. How are we going to generate the money? Now, this argument that the party should look for the money, I've already indicated that we should put it somewhere. The other very important thing, when we had the elections where national executive officers were elected, all the candidates who are contesting, were they not there? Did any of them find out how the party generated the money to be able to organize that particular program? Did any of them tell us, the notices that have been made today, did they tell us how did we brought in about 9,300 delegates across the country? And in fact, renting the place, the cost involved, the hotels, the feeding and everything, did any of them find out how we organize it? Now, if we indeed praise the party for organizing such a thing, why do we then turn around to lynch the party verbally for the fact that they are asking us to also contribute towards this? Assuming.
But in fact, they said that too. Because the days went beyond what we paid for.
Yeah.
Now there's a debt that the party.
No, but even assuming that even there isn't any debt. Now, when the party organized, but for that elections, could we have been talking about electing a flag bearer now? Because we had all agreed that we're going to have the National Delegates Congress first, elect national executive officers. Even beyond that, when we organized constituency elections, regional elections, did any of them find out how the party was able to mobilize that? Now, the impression is also being created as if that the contribution of the aspirants is what is going to be used to organize the elections. Let's even look at the number of aspirants. Are they up to 10? Let's even say that they are up to 10. And each of them is going to pay 400,000 Ghana cedis. I'm just looking at the filing fee. The times 5 will give you how much? 4 million. Isn't it? A times 10 will give you 4 million. We are told that per the rough calculation, you know what they did? The TMT is 40 cedis. Now, take my constituency, for example. Now, talk my former constituency. Now, constituency is not even one of the biggest constituencies. Let me take Yaba Kubori. Part of the constituency, you have to go overseas.
Yes.
Now, if you give someone 40 Ghana cedis, that takes care of TNT, accommodation, and feeding. How are they even going to survive? And if you look at the rough estimates that is being done, 40 Ghana cedis per each, you are talking about 290,000 polling stations. Now, except that we agree that then let's go back to the way things were being done. That we should not even implement what we had all agreed, which was approved at Congress, that our electoral college is going to change. We are expanding the electoral college. Less people vote and let's have delegates who will converge in Accra to engage in that. So I think that if it is prudent for us to demand and even trying to create the impression that the party leadership are so insensitive, that they are indeed doing that, skew it for the support of somebody, I think that for me it is the most outrageous commentary I've heard. I have cited an article written by somebody who support one of the candidates, and the impression was that all these things that are done is skewed to favor President Mahama. As a matter of fact, perhaps that person should find out the role President Mahama played in the organization of the Congress we had. And the impression is also created that, oh, he was just a president. And in that article, he was a president, he has left office, and he should be able to do this. Was President Mahama elected as the president to make money, or he was elected to serve the people of Ghana? And even those who are making those arguments will turn around and say that social democracy doesn't mean that you come and rob the state. Social democracy doesn't mean that once you get a position of leadership, you should use that position to make money. So in one breath, if you want to shout on top of the roof, you are a social democrat, and in another breath, you expect someone who had opportunity through the same principle and ideological position of social democracy to have led the country. Such a person should have enough money to be able to take care of this. And in any case, assuming without admitting that President Mahama even has the money, he will be so foolish to spend that money to organize a program in an elections where others are contesting him. He will be so foolish. He will be so foolish. And in any case, if President Mahama was even a president and you expect him to make money, almost all of them have served in NDC government one way or the other. Did they make money? If they think that President Mahama should be able to make enough money, then they also made money. Now, if they are telling us that they never made money when they were given responsible positions to serve in the NDC in one way or the other, they never made money, they came to serve this country. How are they expecting that others indeed, when they also had equal opportunity, they made money? I think that hypocrisy must be put somewhere. The money is, you agree, what are we going to do? Now, take away, even if they are 10 and they are each going to pay 420,000 Ghana cedis. It will be less than 5 million Ghana cedis. The other 7 million, where is the party going to get it? Now, assuming that we have paid our dues, and let's even begin to find out, all of us, including the aspirants, do they even pay up-to-date dues as members of the NDC? And if they do, how much? And And if you want to juxtapose how much they each have paid, if they want to juxtapose, and considering their economic and social position, do they think that as social democrats they should be sacrificing more than they are sacrificing? We do know that some of them are now paying dues because they have come to contest elections. People haven't even tried to find out. So I think that we need to look at this discourse. Look, part of the reasons Obama was able to generate and mobilize $300 million to contest the elections. It is not just about you getting this money. And thank God, all of them. I have seen people who suggested, and Lawyer Eduji Tamakulu, I read on his Facebook, he said, look, they want 400,000 pro-Mahama committed faithfuls, 400,000, and that each of them will contribute one cedi. And that will be enough. If you think you have the support base and you can do that, I think that you can. No one is saying that that money is too small. No. If you ask me, I can't even get that money. But what we are saying is that under the circumstance, are there several ways? Now, if the party had decided that we want to sit with all the aspirants, and I agree with Nazar when he said that all those indeed who are contesting should have made some input and have listened to this comment. Now, the only input they could have made was that the party would have started with them and say, this is the budget we need to be able to conduct these elections. Let's share the cost of the amount of money among all of you who are contesting. And I believe that they each would have been paying almost 2 million or more than 2 million Ghana cedis for the conduct of these elections. Now, money does play a role. The NDC is in opposition. Whoever emerges as the flag bearer of the party certainly would have to mobilize resources to be able, or at least lead in the mobilization of the resources to be able to, prosecute the 2020 elections. Now, you need part of even democratic leadership and social democratic principles is your ability to generate resources even in prevailing economic circumstances that all of us have been subjected to. The elections we are getting into 2020, and let me say this repeatedly, it is not just about the NDC, it's about liberating this country from subjugation, from if you like economic and political servitude under which we have all been held by this government. And so doing, we should begin to look at how we can. Let us not begin to tear each other apart because of a decision that is taken by a political party such as NDC. And to conclude, I am shocked that the MPP is so much concerned about amount of money that aspirants have been asked to do. They should tell us, are they financing any of the candidates? For which reason? They are so much worried and concerned about the amount of money that people have been asked to pay as filing fee. If they are, financing a candidate, then we need to know.
Thank you very much, Comrade Mutala Ibrahim Mohammed. Let me do a couple of your messages and your contributions before I come to Mr. Pratt. And don't forget the WhatsApp platform is 0233995905. Hamza in Nima says, Comrade Sena, this time is not about just contesting, but it's about rescuing this country from this bunch of wolves who are at the verge of mortgaging this country. The man who has been talking social and economic equality, is he using a bicycle or does he live in a madhouse? As for Guzitano, he is back trying to destroy the NDC after leaving and being brought back by late Professor Mills, on whose achievement are they going to campaign on if they emerge as flag bearers. Hadi from Soutum says, good morning and happy new month to you. Seriously, the second shouldn't be in politics. The second speaker after Nilante shouldn't be in politics at all. A presidential hopeful who can't solicit funds from those who are going to vote him to power shouldn't be in politics. I'll be surprised if Mr. Tano gets 50 votes. How many members does the NDC have? 420,000 is cheap. Each person should be made to pay 1 million. If a candidate can get as many members of the NDC to support, then he is in the best position to lead the party. And Mr. Host and your team, with regard to the NDC registration fee, I have a lot of issues to vomit, but unfortunately, space and time does not allow me. Politics is noted to be a science, but gradually it has shifted to being from being a science to a different angle due to money's involvement. Since when did we realize that money is taking over science and pretend we didn't know? Money took over when competent people cease from being elected to positions because they don't have money to give the electorates. Now the matchstick has sparked fire and it is burning the whole town. We are now lamenting. What is the normal or the legitimate way for a political party to finance its activities? What will be the position of the NEC if all the contestants claim they cannot afford to pay the said amount? Anyway, for time's sake, let me limit my questions. That's from Philip Adika, aka Odaseni. He's in Italy. And this one says, good morning. This is from Mohammed Mubarak Shaibu, Branch Secretary, Nima. I suggest NDC should collaborate with the mobile telecom companies so that good-loving NDC members should be contributing 20 pesos daily to the scratch cards we recharge daily. And let's see how much money we can make if NDC has 3 million members and these people are to subscribe to this. We can do a lot. And then this one from Doris in Tish, she says, peace be unto you, my brother. I just want to ask something. How come the flag bearers are complaining about the money for the forms? How much is one V8 that they can't pay this money for their forms? That is life. When you throw a stone to the wall, it bounces back to you. And to the honorable MPP members too, why have they taken this issue like a World Cup? Is it their business at all on how much money the NDC should pay for their forms? Instead of them to work on their doom, so they are rather talking about issues that's out of the box. And that's from Doris in Tishi, and BB in North Kanesh will be my last message. In fact, the defense of the decision is worse than the decision itself. Our party is now becoming more capitalist than the capitalists. What is worse is that the defendants have succeeded in feeding into the negative perceptions on the decision. That's from BB North Kanesh. Let me come to Mr. Pratt.
First of all, I think, look, in this discussion, we need to set standards. As if we don't set the standards and speak to those standards, you all be talking, as they say, by heart. You understand? We need to answer some very fundamental questions. And it's out of this discussion of the fundamental issues that we can derive a mean by which to judge. You understand? I think one of the first questions that arises is simply, what is a political party? How do people form political parties, join political parties, and pursue the objectives of the political parties? And what are the responsibilities and rights of members? That's what we are discussing. You understand? Now, from my point of view, political parties are congregations of people who claim that they have a common objective to pursue, common social, economic, and political objective to pursue. That is how people congregate in political parties. So, for example, in Ghana, you have the New Patriotic Party, which says that it believes in property-owning democracy. Property-owning democracy is the cement that pulls them together, that shapes that congregation, that gives that congregation a vision to pursue. Then you have the National Democratic Congress, which says that its philosophy, its worldview, is based on an ideology called social democracy. And a lot of times when I listen to members of the National Democratic Congress, they appear quite confused about what social democracy is. There's some clear confusion about social democracy. Social democracy is not anti-capitalist. It's a variant of capitalism. Social democracy is not socialism. You understand? So, social democrats do not aim at building societies in which the means of production, the means of distribution are collectively owned by the working class, which then presumes a certain level of equality. Social democratic parties actually aim at building welfare societies as exist in the Scandinavian countries and some Western countries and so on. That is social democracy. So anytime I hear people shouting about social democracy and saying, oh, how can social democracy or social democrats, be advocating systems which discriminate and so on? I wonder whether they themselves understand the world outlook that they profess to believe in, you know. But be that as it may, I think that all political parties should necessarily insist on the equality of members. It's a principle which must be assumed for all kinds of political parties. Equality of members. I mean, this has become a principle which is accepted by the left and the right everywhere. Equality of membership. Which means that all members of political parties should have the same responsibilities and they should have the same rights. So all members of political parties should be able to aspire to the highest offices in the party and also should be able to contest on the ticket of the party to the highest office in the country and so on. That's a principle that I think we need to explore. Now, all members of the party also have to have the responsibility of contributing to the development of the party. And that contribution sometimes can find expression in monetary contribution. Sometimes not monetary contribution, sometimes it's labor power, physical strength, and so on. Sometimes it's just ideas, and so on. So this is the principle that we ought to work with. Now, I fully understand the complaints that politics in Ghana is becoming unnecessarily monetized. I fully understand that, because I've participated in the processes over many years and I've come to see the extent to which party politics in Ghana is being monetized. The monetization of party politics is not just about filing fees, it's about so many other things. You have a situation where in some parties, an individual can donate 275 buses, which is far more expensive than a filing fee of 400,000 cedis. You understand? That is also monetization of politics. Then if you look at all of those who are complaining, they have been crisscrossing this country campaigning to become presidential candidate of the National Democratic Congress. Ask all of them without exception, which one of them went to a constituency and got the constituency to make a contribution to pay for the meeting they addressed. They all go and they pay TNT for people to assemble. They all go and they bear all the expenses. What hypocrisy is that? Why? They are complaining about filing fees. And yet, when they go to the constituencies to meet delegates to convince them to vote for them, they share money. Is that not monetization? To what extent are the people involved in party organization at the constituency level, especially as it relates to their own campaign? You can't go around distributing, paying TNT for people to come and meet you and complain about 400,000 filing fee. It is hypocritical so to do. It's clear. You understand? So they are even doing worse than what they are criticizing. Let us be honest in this discussion. In any case, if you say that something is too much, it would mean that you have a standard. If 400,000 cedis filing fee is too much, what is acceptable? And so far, until this morning, I had not heard anybody put forward anything that he thinks that is acceptable. They all say that it's too much. Okay, it's too much. We all agree it's too much. What is acceptable? It is only this morning, in all honesty, that I've heard somebody from the Guzitano campaign, my brother sitting in the studio here, trying very hard to suggest something which may be reasonable. But in doing so, he contradicts himself so much that it becomes a problem. Now, what are some of the things that he's saying? One, that you should look at the future income of the aspirants and use that to arrive at the filing fee. What are you doing?
Not the future income of the aspirants.
You're saying that the incomes that they may be earning after...
What they are aspiring to, yes.
Yeah, what they are aspiring to, that's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay.
Is it not the same thing?
No, because it's not, I mean, the future incomes of the aspirants suggest that you're looking at the future incomes of all the aspirants.
Future
income,
all of them. You are fixing filing fee for all of them. And your formula is that if they should become president, if they get elected and they should become president, this is how much they are going to earn. And therefore, we should fix a fee which will make them recover their loss. You have personalized it. It is no longer an organizational matter. In fact, you are now asking them to invest and recoup later. That's what you're saying. So how can you be worried about monetization of politics and be seeing the presidential campaign as an investment for which candidates will recoup later and so on? Yes, sir. No, I will allow you.
Continue.
I will allow you. This is an honest and frank discussion, and I will allow you if you have something to say it.
So, I mean, when I proposed a number of options, right?
I'm going to look at all of them, so don't worry. Okay, but your first option is so contradictory.
Then finish all of them, and then I would answer you.
Because you're saying that it should not be left to the individual and his capacity and so on. Now you're not looking at the individual's capacity today. You are even looking at his capacity when he should become president as a basis for setting filing fee. How can you do that? Don't you see the contradiction?
No. So the argument to that was the fact that what we are doing is
I thought you said I should finish.
No, because you are just.
It's the contribution is not that you should. It's being contributed to execute the project.
So the point is this: now asking people to cough up this kind of money, right? And this is the argument for that point. Amounts to essentially asking them to make a certain investment, right? That tomorrow they are going to have to recoup, and that's what I mean. That has been the rationale behind a lot of these things, right?
Well, you're suggesting accepts that.
No,
you're suggesting
so my suggestion is, if you're looking at this, in order to ensure that, because my argument is that it breeds corruption. Right, it breeds corruption. In order not to let this breed corruption, it breeds corruption, and so we need to ensure we are not doing things that breeds corruption.
Maza, I beg you, can I now?
Yes, you can continue.
Having considered that in both cases you are talking about personal investment which will be recouped in the future, your suggestion doesn't fly. It collapses immediately. You understand? It doesn't fly.
No, but it flies in the face of reasonableness. Because the question that the General Secretary asked was, what is reasonable? Do you understand? It's about what is reasonable.
Please, let me pass land. All right. We'll come back to you. You can make it.
Master, you still don't see that your suggestion has completely collapsed. It has no legs to stand on. Because you, like Asebi Nketia, like everybody else, according to you, see this as an investment which is recoupable. And that's a problem. In fact, that is monetization of politics. You understand? Now, perhaps, the point I'm going to make earlier will suggest that the party leadership is even more progressive than you. Because nowhere in the guidelines has it been stated that aspirants cannot raise funds to pay this contribution. So in real concrete practice, this may be a responsibility which is assigned to the aspirants. That look, we are going to a congress. This is how much we need. You understand? So you as aspirants, as people who belong to a certain category in the party and so on, this is your charge. This is your responsibility. Help us to raise this money. This is the minimum that the party requires from you. So the aspirants can go to their supporters and crowd fund in order to be able to pay this. So there's a certain element of democratic, practice in this, if that is the conception. In your case, however, you remove all elements of democratic practice. They're saying that let's look at the salary he is likely to earn so that he won't suffer. So it's reduced to the individual rather than the collective. And this is a substantial difference that, I think we have, to appreciate. Now listen, It is in only backward democracies that party membership is for free. In many of our parties today, the members don't pay dues. Even in some instances, membership card is procured for them. People pay for their membership card and so on in order to have influence on them. All of those practices lead to the monetization of our politics. It's not just the filing fee. All of those practices, where members no longer pay dues and so on. I've worked in some parties before. In fact, I've virtually worked with all of the parties in this country at one time or the other. Masa, you'll be surprised that in some cases, members of national executive councils and central committees and so on, when they travel from the regions and come to party meetings, the party leadership has to pay their transport, has to feed them, and pay their hotel accommodation. Is that not true? Is that not true? That is true. So the monetization of politics happens at different levels and at all levels. And some of them are even more dangerous than the filing fees and so on. You know, me, sitting where I'm sitting, if you look, maybe this comes closer to the point we made earlier on. If you look at income levels in our country, and you look at the cost of living and so on, very, very, very few people in our society can afford 500,000 for anything. Even for their own health, they cannot afford that. So if it is that you see this as personal individual contributions and so on, then you are excluding a large portion of the society from participating in our national politics at a certain level. You understand? But if you see this as a charge to members to fulfill the obligations of helping the development of building the party and so on, then it's another matter. Look, in the UK, there are parties in the UK that before you become a member of the party, one of the things you have to do is to sell party newspaper. Stand by the roadside and sell party newspaper. You need to sell up to a certain level to raise funds for the party before your membership is approved. You understand? Here what happens? Even dues, they don't pay. People pay dues for them when they are going to contest elections, and the party leadership says that, oh, only those who have paid dues can vote. Then the contestants, the aspirants, gather money and go and pay party dues. We are all doing this and you are complaining. What hypocrisy is that? Are you all not doing that? Are you all not paying dues for people so that they will qualify to vote for you? And then you are sitting here and complaining. You understand? So party membership has responsibilities and so on. And every party can assign those responsibilities to its members, to its leadership, and so on. So they're going to go for a Congress. It is estimated that the Congress is likely to cost between 11 million and 12 million. The party leadership can sit up and say, look, regional chairman, it is your charge that every regional chairman should raise 200,000 cedis. I don't think that the party will be expecting that the money will be coming from the pocket of the regional chairman. They are calling on the regional chairman to use his organizational acumen to raise 200,000 for the party. The party can also decide that all of you presidential aspirants, because we have this emergency and so on, this is how much each of you should raise in order for us to meet our obligation and so on. Now, my comrade, my brother Mutala, he has been persistently been asking some questions as to whether parties do business and so on. Yes, parties do things that generate resources. Why?
No, comrade, I said parties are not elected in the government.
No, but for the achievement of their objectives and so on.
The difference in
yes.
money.
Yeah, parties, why? If you go to Turkey,
make money.
The ACT party, which is in power, actually operates manufacturing concerns. You understand? If you go to other places, the smaller parties and so on, they have established hostels. They sell newspapers and other publications and so on.
In the UK, some have grocery shops.
Exactly, in order to generate the resources to fund the parties. Because it is realized that, look, You can't depend on party dues alone to fund all the projects of the party. In any case, all of us who are shouting and complaining about the fact that 400,000 is an unreasonable figure and so on, what is a reasonable figure? Today, if you decided that the filing fee for presidential candidate in the NDC is 50,000, I'm sure 80% of the membership of the party will not be able to pay. If you decided that it was 50,000, 80% of party members will not be able to pay 50,000. So it means that even if it's 50,000 cedis, it will lead to the exclusion of vast numbers of members of the party and so on. So all of us should be talking about what is it that all of us can do in order to democratize our political parties, not just NDC, the CPP, the NPP, the PNC, and so on. What is it that we can do in order to democratize these parties? Of course, a number of suggestions have been made. One of those suggestions has been the state funding of political parties. And I disagree with the state funding of political parties. Because our parties have not reached the level of accountability and transparency which should allow the state to put monies into the operations. Well, the law says that after every election, these parties should submit their accounts to the Electoral Commission. Go and see the accounts that they submit to the Electoral Commission. In many instances, the total amount of money they claim to have spent on the national campaign is not enough to finance the campaign at the ward level. You understand? So with this level of fraudulence and so on, why should the state resources be given to the parties which are not transparent, which are not open and so on, to organize their elections and so on? I mean, it beats me completely. But the monetization of politics is an important issue that needs serious discussions. Not discussions which are only informed by the ambition of individuals. Because that's what we are having. Discussions which are honest, discussions which are based on empirical facts, discussions which are not about what advantage one person is getting over the other and so on, discussions which are generally about how to improve national politics. And those discussions should include how to organize presidential campaigns. Why? When the aspirants go to the regions, should they be paying for everything from their pocket? And if they shouldn't be paying for everything from their pocket, where should the money come from? And if you ask them why they go to the regions and constituencies and polling stations and they dash monies and so on, they will tell you about the poverty of the people. The same people will then turn around and say, look, the same poor people who cannot afford the 50 cedis they give them to come to their meetings and so on, they should contribute 12 million in order to hold the presidential primaries. Don't you see the inconsistency? Don't you see the hypocrisy? Master, let us be real and stop this hypocrisy.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Pratt.
Yeah, I just want to make a brief comment on Nazar's point on the issue of inconvenience of the scheduling by the party. Okay. Political parties have always had a timetable. All these apparents have been aware. In fact, they were prepared to have their presidential elections on December 7th. December 7th, because that was what our constitution earlier on, until we went to Congress, had stipulated, that it must be 2 clear years before the national elections. So they were preparing towards December 7th. In fact, the last Congress had actually given them 6 more weeks to conduct their business by shifting the date forward to now 21 months before the elections. It said not less than 21 months. So it could happen tomorrow, after December 7th, it could be 8 December, or it could be 7th March. Between 7th March and 8 December, we could have the presidential primaries on any day. And I'm saying that if people who were ready to have the elections on December 7th will today be complaining about 17th or 19th January, then there's a hypocrisy. My point is that. And 2, the presidential candidate, presidential hopefuls, who I don't say are candidates, hopefuls, cannot tell me that they don't have the machinery in place to be able to pick their forms and send the forms through the country for endorsement, through the constituencies for endorsement within 4 weeks. I can't imagine that you think that you have the machinery to conduct a successful primaries, and you don't have the system that will be able to pick your form and go through 275 constituencies. Now, look, I want to offer simple consultancy to all of them. You don't need to go around yourself. All that you need are agents. So you need 10 agents who go to 10 regions, or supporters, who go to the 10 regions and take your form to a region and go through the constituencies. So within 1 week, almost all of them will have completed the signatures and come back to Accra. So there's no miracle about this. It's just organizational ability and power. 2, I don't think that they need 1 month to campaign. They've been campaigning all this while. And in fact, some of them for 2 years. Some of them even started before their target John Mahama started recently. Some of them have been campaigning. Someone like Professor Alabi have been campaigning for almost 2 years. Sylvester Mensah, almost even before the elections in December was held. I saw Spiogaba 2020 t-shirts even before we had 2016 elections. You understand? So when people talk about the time being inconvenient, the time has been scheduled to suit. Today I've seen a paper saying that they announce it as a birthday gift to John Mahama. Can you believe people thinking this way in this civilization? As if we are 40 years back. So if it was announced today, wouldn't it be somebody's birthday? So would it be a birthday gift? Somebody say, why should it even be on the day of John Mahama's birthday? Oh God.
It wasn't on that day. It was on Wednesday.
So it's a problem for me to understand. And 2, Comrade Kwesi Pratt has extensively explained. I think when it comes to issue about we looking at how we finance our political parties, I have always believed in what Kwesi has said. I said, look, the ANC in South Africa have means of raising resources from businesses and commercial activities they engage in. All of us always troop to South Africa to look at what they are doing at ANC. Not all. I mean, all the political parties. So I think that these are models all over the world. He mentioned about the ACT party in Turkey. Yes. I had the opportunity of talking to one of their officials. He said, look, the amount of income they generate from newspapers, from the media, these things that they have, is enormous. Think that I've heard Kwesi talk about these things most of the time, that this idea of political parties must not do business, must not, for example, own newspapers, must not have radio stations and all those things. He's hypocritical. We know political parties whose agents and assigns and supporters are owning radio stations, owning newspapers, and all this. In fact, some of them I believe sincerely, some of these institutions and entities are actually owned by the political parties, but under the cover of individuals. Because if they don't, I don't think that the sort of things that happens in some of those institutions will be able to stand the test of time. 3, we were in this country when people criticized a lot about the fact that people who aspire for political power, political offices, do so because of money. I just want one thing. Like Kwesi said, I don't believe, and I will never accept the fact that Murtala gives me money for my campaign should be a guarantee for me to give contract to Murtala. It doesn't make sense to me. So, like we are saying, assuming today, as this morning, as I have said, people have lined up in John Mahama's office asking that the security open the gate and get somebody to be taking money from them, 5 cities, 10 cities, 20 cities, from them as their contribution. So, John Mahama should write the names of all those who have lined up and give all of them contracts and jobs. Is that what you are saying? How is it possible in America Obama could raise these millions? Hillary Clinton raised over $17.17 million from individuals. Did they do that because those people are going to line up at the White House when Hillary Clinton had become president to give them jobs, to give them contracts? Why do we think that those systems will help in the US, but in Ghana, is only perceived as a way of corrupting individuals who hold public office. Because I have benefited from people's contributions. All the businessmen, shop owners and things believed in me. They saw what I did as an assembly member. So even people who are MPP in my area contributed money into my campaign. And I don't perceive that they did that because they're expecting jobs or any benefits from me. Because up to today, they haven't come to me to ask those things. And I've gone to some of them and they are still giving me. You understand? Up to today, I have known Mutala, when he was member of parliament, organized a fundraising to support a project in his constituency. And does it mean the people who will contribute to those fundraising are doing that because there are some desired benefits that will be accruing to them from his stewardship as a member of parliament? I think we must try to erase those perceptions, because if we don't do that, then the system of mobilizing resources will always be seen as a conduit for corruption. But if we create the environment and the perception and the belief that, look, political parties are supposed to generate open opportunities for people who believe in those systems and those ideologies to contribute to the development of the parties and ultimately for the development of the state, then people will freely. But if we say that it is only meant for people, because if you create the impression that it's only meant for contributions to political advancement, is only meant for people who want to have some favors, the ordinary person who is working there will not want to contribute, because he knows that then he will not, because how much is he going to give to compete with you, Sena, who is giving million, so that the 1 cedi I will give will not be recognized. But we should make it possible that everybody will feel that even if I have 1 cedi, it doesn't matter, my 1 cedi is meaningful. Somebody who has 10,000 is meaningful. Somebody who has 1 million is meaningful. All of us are contributing to the same cause. Then we'll be able to achieve something. This is my comment that I want to make over the destiny expressed by my brother Nazar. And let me finally say this. Nazar, the guidelines you talk about, we've talked about money extensively.
Yes.
And we talk about timing. Mm-hmm. Yes, I think one of the most important things I just want to ask, since you speak for my very good friend Guzi, one of the basic qualifications for this is that the person should have been a member of the party for at least 10 years. And until last July, when the Eagle Party, the Reform Party applied to EC to be delisted, I thought Guzi was a member of the Reform Party. So I would rather advise that he doesn't spend too much money on this. By the conditions that have been set already, it's going to be very difficult for him. It's going to be very difficult for him to contest. So we should spare.
Thank you. Let's hear now.
This free consultancy. I just thought about it, and I'm giving it to you.
So actually, I mean, the 10 years thing you talk about. I mean, this is not an admission that you are right that he was not a member of the NDC.
But I know you should accept that.
No, I mean that's actually a wrong position. That's not correct.
That he was a member of the Reform Party.
Yes, that's not correct.
He wasn't.
No, that's not correct.
He was a member of the Reform Party.
No, that's not correct.
So if I go to letter commission tomorrow, the letter commission have evidence to show that as far as by July 17th, 2018, Guzitawe's name was not on the listing as a member of the Reform Party.
He wasn't. So I mean, as far as I'm aware, he was not a member of the Reform Party. He was a member of the NDC, and your position that up until now he wasn't a member of the party is wrong. But
that's the issue.
Yeah. Well, but he didn't contest as flag bearer. He contested as flag bearer in 2000. That's what happened.
So you say after contesting as flag bearer in 2000, he has never been a member of the Reform.
I mean, at some point in time after 2004, a lot of them resigned from the party and went back to.
And who resigned from the party?
These are issues that I think will be better for him to address himself. But your position is not correct. I mean, but let's leave it there.
I can say with more justification the fact that as at 2008, when he was formally invited to assist in the campaign of Professor Mills, he was still a member of the Reform Party.
Okay. Let's. I mean, this is not the topic for discussion. But let's move on.
He was personally invited by Professor Mills.
Okay.
Let's deal with the matter.
If there are people I can say,
but let's move on. Let's move on from let's move on from
the issues about.
Yeah. So let's deal with the matter on the table. Right?
Let's move on. I mean, let's move on from there. But if you are bringing up the issue of the 10 years, right? Actually, I've looked at the constitution. I didn't see that in the constitution.
Which constitution?
The NDC constitution.
Oh, but guidelines are different from constitution.
No, but you see,
but what constitution gives the National Executive Committee the power, the mandate to set up guidelines for elections.
No, but actually, it says guidelines in accordance with, I think it's Article 41 or Article 42 of this constitution, which means the guidelines should be consistent with the constitution.
That's why when you look at the guidelines, it said, apart from this, these are the other guidelines.
No, but the point is that assuming those guidelines are elections specific,
yes,
it will not bar him from contesting.
Okay.
I mean, it's not
the issues
so
that we can move on.
So I mean, that's a different issue, and that's that's something that I don't think we are here to discuss. Okay. But there's a lot I can say about
the issue has to do with the guidelines for the presidential primaries of the party as it prepares to elect a flapper.
Yeah. Yes,
that's the topic we've been given.
No, I know, but what I'm saying is, if you bring up the issue, the 10 years guideline actually is not consistent with the constitution, which says you develop the guidelines that have to be consistent with the constitution. So essentially, I mean, that means basically what you're doing is you're giving the power to whoever is setting up this guideline to rewrite the constitution.
The NEC.
The constitution, but the constitution actually has set up eligibility criteria.
And what does the constitution say about the NEC? The constitution, the NEC is the highest decision-making body of the party.
Yeah, but the NEC doesn't have the ability to change the constitution.
No.
But because that's what you're saying. Basically, what you're saying is the NEC has the ability to change the constitution.
No.
Yeah, but that's
the NEC constitution vests power in the NEC.
Yes,
to set up guidelines for every.
They have to be consistent.
If the power is vested on the NEC to set up guidelines for every elections, my understanding is that the guidelines will be election specific. In that sense, I don't think that if you are getting into 2020 elections, you can take guidelines that were set up by NEC in 2012 elections or 2008 elections. I'm coming. Because except that you are telling me that once we set the guidelines, it permits, we don't even change them. But my understanding is that every election, that's what I'm saying. So if at a point in time there was an elections and the guidelines determined that for you to be able to contest, you should have been a member of the party for 10 years. It's possible. I'm saying that is it the new guideline?
Yes, the new guideline.
For this 2020?
Yes.
Okay, then that's
but what I'm saying is,
but will it be taking a retrospective effect?
No.
I think that for me,
but let's ask me. They said the membership we are talking about should have been the last 10 years of the party.
I see.
And should have been a paid-up member since 2017 January.
Yeah, but you know, it's actually interesting, right? Because just based on what you're saying, it feels to me that the guidelines are targeted at Mr. Tano. But because you seem to be basically making arguments, bringing him and then making certain arguments that seem to suggest that these are targeted at essentially disqualifying. But what I'm saying is,
the banter and the
he said we are
because the banter doesn't seem to be ending. So let's let Nasa come in and then
all right. So there are a few points that I need to make. One is the fact that the expanded electoral college is not a new thing, right? So if you say we didn't just wake up after the NEC elections to realize that we're going to have a presidential elections that covers everywhere, right? That's going to be based in every constitution, right? So we have known for a while that this is not the first time that NDC is holding elections in all the constituencies.
But the number of delegates.
No, but the last time was actually more than this. When all the party members actually, so the last time was actually more than this. So this is actually a smaller number compared to what the NDC did previously.
The last time was a referendum on John Mahama.
No, but whatever be the case, NDC has held this election before. So for any political party that plans, of course, then this should have been part of the planning process. Unless there was a plan to essentially forget about all of that and have it as a Congress like you have. So this has been there. It's not a new thing. So it's not something that we don't need to create the impression as if we just woke up one day and realized we have to hold elections in all constituencies, and so we need to rush and get the money for it. Okay, so that's one. I do agree with Kwesi Pratt that we need to look at election financing, and that's an important thing. And of course, that is part of the problem that we have in this country: election financing. When you talk about state funding and not agreeing with the fact that, I do think state funding can work, and state funding could actually be a path to ensuring the kind of transparency that we need in elections, election financing. When you cite the U.S., examples in the U.S. and all of the U.S. has certain rules that allow political parties or that ensure that political parties basically declare who is funding this, who is donating what, how much do they donate, and all of those things. Well, of course, but they have means of also enforcing it, right? So perhaps what we need to do is not to say, well, but people raise this in the U.S. Let's find out how, in our context, we can also ensure that those transparency rules are actually then implemented. And then you can talk about, well, so then get people to just go around and raise all the money. My problem is not the fact that people should not contribute to funding this. My problem is the fact that you shouldn't have a few people, because when a few people are the ones contributing to it, then that few people have ownership to it. If you have a broad base contributing to it, no single one of them can get up and say, it is my property. So if the base of NDC is contributing to the NDC, of course, that is fine. But if you have a few 10 or so people within the NDC contributing more than 50% of all the resources, that then becomes problematic. Okay, so that's essentially what I was saying. And yes, the fundraising or the 400K could be something that the party has said, okay, you guys want to be presidential candidates, let's support the party by raising funding. That's absolutely fine, right? But the point here is fundraising skills should not necessarily be equated to the skills to become a president, right? So yes, you can contribute by supporting with the fundraising, and every member of the party can contribute. But that should not become a criteria, because the difference here is becoming a criteria for deciding who actually leads the party and who becomes president. And I'm saying fundraising skills do not necessarily make a good president. That should not be the criteria for deciding who becomes the president of or the leader of the party. That essentially is what it is. But yes, I agree with a lot of your points about campaign financing. I do think we need to take a second look at our campaign financing. We have suggested at some point in time that even at these town hall meetings that are held with executives, branch and constituency executives, there should be a way of encouraging them to actually then contribute to fund their own parties. Okay, and this the culture of TNT, feeding them and all of that. Yes, I think they are all part of the problem with our system, and they are all things that we need to look at. How do we change them?
My brother, just a minute.
Okay.
Your party, and I'm not a member of the party, went through polling station elections. You call them branches. Went through branch elections, all the way to constituency elections, all the way to regional elections, and to a national delegates conference, which had 9,300 people attending.
Yep.
Have you bothered to find out how all of these were financed? Have you bothered to find out? Have you bothered to find out whether party members contributed or a few people financed this? You have been happy to participate in this from the branch level up to the national level.
No, actually, this is assuming I've been happy. I have not been happy to participate in this.
But you have not raised it as an issue.
No, I have raised it in an issue in several. Look, there are writings. If you see any of my writings, you see this has been issues that have.
So the last Congress, the Congress which was held. Can I finish? The Congress which was held at the trade fair sites. The various aspirants. Did they complain about who financed it?
No.
Did they complain about the level of contributions of individuals and so on? Why has it now become an issue?
No, it has always been an issue. That's this. You see, the assumption. The assumption that it has become an issue.
All the newspapers commenting a whole new press conference.
Because there's always a tipping point. There's always a point.
So when it comes to them, there's a tipping point.
No, it's not when it comes to them. It is. There's always a tipping point. There's always an issue that then triggers, bring this into the. Yeah.
All the aspirants, including your
aspirant, Mr. Guzi Tando, they went around the country, and when they went around, they didn't just go around to greet NDC people. They went around to meet elected delegates at the branches. A process was done to legitimize the positions of individuals at the various branches as elected NDC branch executive. They went to meet those people. The simple question Comrade is asking is, did you try to find out how those people were elected and the processes that the processes that led to this?
Who paid for those processes?
That's one.
Okay, so let me answer that. I actually have an answer. I have an answer.
Let me finish.
Okay, I have an answer.
Let me finish. The issue here is that almost all the aspirants are everywhere talking. All of them. Forget of you people who are their spokespersons. They've all granted interviews and expressing their appall of the amount of money that they are being asked to pay. Now, the hypocrisy here is that the delegates you went around at the various branches and constituencies and regions to meet, there was a process that made them delegates, for which reason you can go and meet those people. As a matter of fact, when all the aspirants went, former executive, you didn't see the need to meet them because their legitimacy was no longer in existence. You met people who were elected through a process, and that process demanded huge sums of money. What did you say? Did you try to find out the rationale? Now, if you are talking about the fact that the amount of money is huge, equally huge amounts of monies were spent to organize that, it's because you are now being asked to contribute. But let's also get this very clear. You are being asked to contribute towards a process, to execute a project. It is not that the party says that every year pay 420,000. And now when you tell me that few people are being asked to pay, Comrade gave a scenario. He said 50,000. As a matter of fact, if you even say 5,000 throughout, a lot of people in NDC will not be able to pay. Everybody has equal stake in the NDC. No, so if I'm a track pusher and I think that I am above 40 years, the constitution doesn't specify, and I'm sound mind. I want to be a president, but I can't generate 5,000 Ghana cedis. It means that I'm excluded. So if you want to stretch this exclusion, and the fact that those amount of money are being asked, people are being asked to pay and want to use it as monetized, and that's why I ask that simple question. Let us contextualize this discourse in the larger picture that we have all agreed that we should expand our electoral college. And by expanding the electoral college, we need to have a process to be able to elect a flag bearer. We've all agreed, and at no point in time did Guzi or any of the aspirants raise an issue with regards to the expansion of the electoral college. We've all agreed.
But now, if we have all agreed, college has always been expanded.
No, I say expanded. We have never had this.
We have had even more than this.
Never.
Where?
No,
never.
The last one.
The last one.
No.
Yes.
You see, you know the difference. The difference between that and this one is that the last one, people voted at branches. That is the difference.
That's why I'm saying that's even more than this.
Nada. If you calculate TNT, 40 Ghana cedis times 290,000, that will give you almost 8 million. Are you getting what I'm saying? So take away the TNT and you tell me how much it's going to cost. And in any case, the last elections, because people did it at the branch level, it was even parliamentary. That elections was for parliamentary, and parliamentary candidates paid. And the dues that we paid at that time was the dues they used to organize those elections at the constituency levels. So you can't equate that with the presidential elections. You can't.
I think we should achieve some clarity. Yeah. My position is clear. The monetization of politics is terrible.
Absolutely.
It undermines democratic practice and so on. It's an issue that is worthy of being raised and discussed and so on. But it should not be done for personal convenience. Because if you do it for personal convenience, you devalue the debate.
Absolutely.
This should not be about Spio Gabra, it should not be about John Mahama, and it should not be about Guzi Tando. It should be about how to democratize politics in Ghana. And it is not about NDC or NPP. It's about all the political parties. What is it that we ought to do in order to remove the influence of money in the choice of our leaders? That's the principal question. And in doing so, in discussing this matter, we should avoid hypocritical stances. People who are going around constituency and so on, dishing money for people to come and meet them to discuss their ambition. They don't find anything wrong with that. But when it comes to paying filing fees for presidential candidate, then they are complaining. That is hypocritical.
No, but actually, and this why I said I have an answer. No, but you see, that's why I said I have an answer to it. Yes.
No, but neither shouldn't equate, neither shouldn't compare what is being done with the parliamentary elections, which we did, and said that everybody should vote. Okay. It was done
as a member of parliament, I think that it's not fair to me. For example, let me take it for example. As we see today, I am maintaining the party in my constituency. I am
by what
the
means?
Party. I pay for the salary of people working in the party office. I take care of the rent of the party office. People die, funerals, and other responsibilities of the party. I take
all of that from your salary as a member of parliament.
As an MP.
I mean, and is that sustainable?
Listen. So if assuming I say I won't do it, the party dies in the constituency.
No, but is that sustainable?
Fine. So you are talking about.
And how are you able to afford it? I mean, those are questions.
Tomorrow, the party comes with the decision and say that all those who want to contest parliamentary elections should pay 20,000. Do you think the party isn't fair to me?
What the party? Okay. I mean, that's what. That's exactly.
To the plan of the party.
No, but all I'm saying is, how are you able to afford all of this on your salary as an MP? I mean, that is a critical question. And those are the questions about campaign financing and party financing that we need to answer. But that aside, I just wanted to answer your question. You asked me a number of questions. I just wanted to answer.
I'm saying that
you said we went out, right? We went out. Let me finish. Let me finish.
One person landing.
You said we went out. We met all the.
Not only you, all that's
everybody. And what did we say about this campaign financing and the processes led to?
No, I didn't talk about campaign financing. What I have said, I was just adding to what Sina Kwesi Pratt said about the hypocrisy, that these issues are being raised because people feel individually affected, because there are those contesting and they are being asked to pay a certain amount of money as filing fees. And then the question I asked was that we had other processes that elected branch, constituency, and regional executive, whom you have gone round to meet.
They have not asked how they do
and I can actually give you videos of our candidates speaking to delegates and actually raising these issues and telling them that they need to own the party at the branches.
How?
And by contributing, by actually, and there are videos.
No, we all agree. We are all on the same.
No, but you are asking if we have said it.
No,
and I'm saying we have.
This issue of contribution, as if in fact you are blaming the party executive for paying the amount of money as 420,000, isn't it? You have problems with that. Yes. And I agree with you that yes, the money seems to be a bit high, but I'm saying that we should contextualize the discourse. That yes, the money is high. The total amount of money we need to execute this project is over 11 million. Where are we going to get the money? And the only way we can get the money is from the contribution. Now, for you to tell me that you are not taking hypocritical position, you should have been asking questions how we organize the other elections. We spent money. Why didn't you raise an issue?
No, but that's what I'm saying. We have. That's what I'm saying. We have raised this issue.
Is it based on?
You have. I mean, I can give you videos.
No, about what?
Ask a question. Is it based on whole meeting?
About what? The money.
Please, let's move on to the next topic. I'd have to go to the messages from our listeners, because the banter is not ending. So
the
please.
party has so much money that all these systems and processes that the party has gone through.
He wants to take his time. I want to take the messages. Then, if we move to the next topic, if you have any issues you want to raise, you can raise it before you make your contribution in the next topic. Okay. So this is from Black Joe in Nima. He says, "Hi, Senna and the comrades. In fact, the filing fee is too much. 400,000 Ghana cedis. What? NDC is known as Mobura Party. Making the party too expensive is unfair, and it will deter some brilliant and intelligent ones who are poor in the near future. At least 1 billion OCDs is okay. NEC must quickly reverse this decision and come back again. And as much as the party needs money, it's not fair to put the party's expenses on the presidential aspirants." Sam in UK says, "Senna, good morning. It seems to me like this government have been bewitched. All the policies they are implementing are not the kind of policies we the citizens are interested in. Furthermore, they do not even think through any of the bogus policies they are implementing, be it free senior high school, dugouts being called dams, creation of new regions, construction of a cathedral and Bible museum, 4191D1F, bogus Ghana Post GPS, etc., empowering Wache and Koko sellers, unnecessary elevation of JB Dankwa, etc. Please tell the government that we are not happy with the way the country is being managed. We are tired of the blame game. Nanado is tired and must go in 2020. And this one says, hi, Radio Gold. A lot of you are sending comments that are not. So, Senator Comrade Mutala is correct. Is the NPP financing any of the contestants? If not, why are they worried about the amount charged by NDC for its presidential contest? Thank you. You didn't add your name. Ian Ghana in Nongwa says, good morning, all incredible. So he starts by saying incredible. So the government, MPP, etc., saying the NDC presidential filing and nomination should be free for millions of members to contest. So if nobody contributes and somebody becomes president, there will be no appointments and award of contracts. Whatever the case, JDM will win. So they can't run away from JDM. They should give us a break. Hashtag 2020 will tell. Williams Nkoforido says, how can the 800-pound gorilla of corruption be eliminated when the NDC is demanding 420,000 from potential aspirants? Whilst in opposition, the party is grooming these aspirants to be potential thieves. This is a clear communist inferior tactics aimed at winnowing out those aspirants without the financial muscle. And this one says, good morning, Senator. Issues being raised about the outrageous filing fee by the NDC party are legitimate. Even if it was 10 Ghana, and as human as we are, there will still be complainants. Nonetheless, we should discuss them with decorum. My NDC party, especially the leadership, should not forget the words of our founder Rawlings, J.J. Rawlings, that we should listen to ourselves. So therefore, I wish to appeal that the filing fee be reduced moderately through the explanations of the General Secretary. Though the explanations of the General Secretary are as clear as crystal, vis-a-vis raising funds to organize the pending flag bearership elections. This is important in order to curtail unnecessary comments and tensions which may jeopardize the fortunes of our dear NDC party in 2020 elections and beyond. Ghanaians would forgive NDC if we fail to win 2020 election to save Ghanaians from this hardship being perpetrated by the incompetent MPP-led Nanado government. Look at how education today at all levels is being manhandled, if not completely deteriorated under the MPP-led Nanado government. That's from Ahovi Francis at Valley View branch. And Farouk in Kasua says, the aspirants must do well to pay. The party needs the cash to conduct the nationwide flag bearership contest. No withdrawals will be entertained. If you attempt to withdraw, we will chase you to your home with the form. Cash on delivery. That's from King Farouk in Kasua. Hi, Senator. Please tell Nasser and the people like him just to contribute their biblical widow's mite to their preferred candidates and stop denigrating the NDC. They have no genuine support. It's pure economics and no empty and unrealistic political ideologies. And that's from Efo Ganyu in Keta in the Volta region. And this one, Dennis Yao Akwete says, Senator, the NDC leadership must indeed rethink its position on this filing fee stuff. It is unreasonable, especially given the fact when the last MPP's filing fee was fixed at 500,000, it was highly criticized, including persons from the NDC. Yesterday, I listened to Sylvester Mensah on this on your network and believed he has a point, except that I always have problems with the way he communicates his mind, always antagonizing GM. And again this same yesterday, as he made the point to suggest that GM was the only person contacted before fixing the filing fee. This behavior of Sly is becoming irritating, nauseating, and despicable to say the least. And Sly should be told that this kind of disposition can't lead the NDC, even if GM should step down. Shalom. And also, Eric Kono at La Paz says that social democracy did not mean the NDC party should not raise funds to prepare very well towards the 2020 NDC. NDC need competent people who can support the party proper, not those crying about that 400,000. So, Lucy Wager says, good morning. It is time we all join hands, work together, and win power from this wicked government come 2020. And this one says, my name is Isaac from Amasaman. I love the dissension of the neck. If you can't pay the money, give us a break. And he ends our discussion on the very first topic. So if you just join us, so listen to Alhaji And Alhaji. It's probably brought to you by TT Brothers, Franco Trading Enterprise, and Kulun Ghana Limited. Don't forget you can join the discussion on 0233-995905. My name is Senna Numbo. And let's move to our next topic. It's about the current challenges being experienced in the power sector, and assurances being given by government that they will fix it. Well, let's start with Honorable again. Honorable.
Well, thank you very much. I have listened to so many commentaries on this power crisis. Some people even trying to redefine and change the language or the adjectives that describe the situation we find ourselves. I will concede that issue of energy in this country has been a very difficult issue. Sometimes I sit and ask myself, what would have happened to this country if Nkrumah had not conceptualized and built the Akosombo Dam? I grew up in a country in Ghana where at that time Akosombo has not reached every part of this country. So for example, the whole of Brong-Ahafo region where I grew up, we were on generators. And certain parts of Brong-Ahafo will have light for 2 hours and another part will have light. I grew up in Accra where not every part of Accra had electricity. So certain places, we used to have street lamps. So over the period, successive governments have tried to see how the very, very important necessity of our life, energy, power, will reach certain places almost, if not almost every part of the country. And I want to say 99% of this achievement as supplementary to what Nkrumah had left us had been achieved under the NDC government, PNDC, NDC government. Because there's no record of the 8 years of President Kufuor adding 1 megawatt. If there's something they did, they started the Bui Dam, but they didn't finish. So there was even a time when people thought that it was almost impossible for electricity to go to places like the Afram Plains. And when this time when cables were actually laid under the river to get people in Afram Plains and other islands and villages electricity. So today I sit down and admire where Ghana has come from and where we've gotten to. But one thing which is obvious, the fact that when we're expanding electricity to all these parts of the country, we do not look at the growth in population and also adding up to what Nkrumah had left. So the realities dawn on us, and we face this squarely when the changes in the weather made it impossible for the Akosombo Dam and possibly its assistant, the Bong, to be able to power the level of expansion that we've created. So there was a need. Proactively, the Mills Mahama administration and substantially under Mahama and Mr. Atta's administration decided that, look, if we continue to depend on only the source of power we have, we will not be able to make any meaningful contribution to the productivity and the development of this country. So we needed to add. And I think that is symbolized in the very statement John Mahama made in the Parliament of Ghana when he said that I have not come to manage myself out of this energy situation, but I will want to fix it. So the generational thinker is, he said, look, what can we do in order to provide for tomorrow? So tomorrow's generations will not face the same problem we are facing today. So various investments were done. In fact, I sat in Parliament and voted to approve so many agreements that saw Ghana getting money to extend our energy supply. One of the critical investments the NDC government has made in the generation of power is that Tuambo gas. In fact, people lambasted the then Mills administration for going to China to look for 3 billion CDB loan, insulted us, and to the extent that a politician stood somewhere and said, this government has revert to borrowing as a means of governance, that if borrowing was the only thing that means somebody could govern, then her 17-year-old child could govern this country. And I listened to Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia on several platforms lambasting the then John Mahama administration over the series of loans that were being taken in order to advance, especially the power generation of this country. So many investments were made into Ameri, Car Power, Tico 2, and other sources of generations. In fact, even support for Asogli, Sino Asogli 2, and all those things were made. Today, Ghana is said to have close to 5,000 megawatts. So we have close to excess of 2,000 megawatts of our installed capacity. This has been done to make the dream of John Mahama to make Ghana a net exporter of electricity a reality. The last time I checked, I heard Nana Akufo-Addo saying that Ghana is now the net exporter of electricity. I said, hold it. Christ me. How did Ghana become a net exporter of electricity? How? The same person you were insulting as incompetent, visionless, clueless, has today created what you can proudly and arrogantly beat your chest and say, my country Ghana is a net exporter of electricity. You see the hypocrisy. When we were leaving office, we have left this legacy. But today, I'm not surprised, because I will just use one analogy. Your father built estates for you and also left in his will an amount of money for you in a bank. And he said, I have borrowed monies from some banks to do this, but this money is there for you to stagger the payments of the loans I've taken to build all these estates for you. So you come in order to advance your political agenda. You sold some of your father's estates. You also chop the money in the bank. And then you turn around to blame your father for taking too much loan from the banks and leaving you with debt. It's the same scenario we are seeing. I guess you understand the political analogy I've drawn. When we're living, we've been able to have the ESLA. The ESLA was supposed to create the necessary funding mechanism in order to address the legacy debt that have been accrued as a result of the financing of crude to power our electricity. Almost 200-something million had been left in the ESLA account for this government. And the system had been made in such a way that from the money that was accruing into the ESLA, within 5 years, we should be able to clear all this debt. Within 5 years. a government comes in, the government is not only benefiting from the excess capacity that have been generated before it came to power, because all these issues are doomed. So because of this investment, John Mahama's government ended the spiral of Doomso by the 15th of November 2015. After that, we had intermittent power outages, which is as a result of them. But as far as what we experienced in the past 2.5 years was concerned, it has come to an end by November 15th, 2015. Today, we're virtually going back to the problems that were envisaged. But that's the right thinking out of the box was ensured to make sure that provision was made. The current government has been borrowing from the ESLA to take care of their ill-thought free SHS, to finance their ill-thought free SHS. You remember very well prior to the elections, Nana Addo appeared before, is it a Straight Talk or which program? On BBC. Yeah. And it was asked a simple question. How are you going to finance this free SHS? One village, one dam, one constituency, 1 million things we are talking about. And he said when he becomes president, they've done the mathematics, and when he becomes president, handle it. Up to today, the government do not know how it's financing these activities. Let me give you, for example, this 1 million one constituency thing they are talking about. Where are they taking the money from? They are virtually taking money from the District Assembly's Common Fund to finance these projects. In my constituency, they said the 1 million one constituency project are 2 boreholes that they've sunk. 2 boreholes that they've sunk at Bukom and then at the slaughterhouse. In fact, they have not sunk 2 boreholes. They've tested for the water and they've located where they could get water. And I have said that activity I am aware, but yet to see the borehole. So for my 2017 1 million, it went into testing the soil in order to get water. So I don't know whether they are going to use my 2018 1 million to put the pump on it, and then maybe 2019 to do commissioning of the borehole. I don't know. But that is what I'm talking about. So monies that were meant to take us away from the problems that we'll be encountering in the provision of power and energy are being used for other things that were not taught properly. That financing and funding for them were not critically thought about. So today, we've had the IPPs, the independent power producers, being owed huge sums of money, and as such, it affected their procurement of gas for the powering of the systems we have. So you have Car Power reducing their production from 250 to 50 megawatts. You have Asogli going down. You have other. Yesterday I heard the Minister for Energy saying that they'll be able to pay $100 million to WACO, the West Africa Gas Company. That means it's a confirmation of the fact that they were what we are talking about, that the issue we are facing critically today is not a matter of generation capacity as was faced under John Mahama, but it's an issue of financing. Those days, they said that it is not generation capacity. But it was obvious that Akosombo and Ekpong was not able to provide for the needs of Ghana at that time. So we thought about generation capacity. We thought about building our capacity to generate more and even export. And we also put other mechanisms to resolve the financial difficulties that will be associated with the provision of that service and that utility. But they have that service and utility provided already for them. Just the financing agreement, they are very competent enough to incur so much debt. They are very competent enough to even squander the monies that have been left for them in the ESLA. They are very competent enough to use the ESLA money to pay for their so-called free SHS, which has created traffic light situation for us. I don't know whether it is green and yellow track or double track or shift system. That one is there. So I'm saying that the system, what we are facing today, is a clear case of gross incompetence in the management of something that have been cooked, prepared, and served on the table for the MPP government, and nothing else. Because they can't justify why we should experience what we are experiencing, apart from the fact that they have mismanaged the system. Because if we look at the mechanisms that were created, there was no way there should be any financial difficulties for the IPPs, for government to pay the IPPs for the provision of the utility. There was no way they should have that problem, because the generation capacity have been resolved already with the extra capacity we've built, and the financial problems regarding the production of the energy has also been resolved by the provision through the ESLA and also the system of financing these producers. So in short, I would say that what we are experiencing in the country is, to some extent and to a large extent, the visionless and the ineptitude, the gross ineptitude of people who have been entrusted with the management of this country. Total ineptitude. Because basic challenge of making sure that the money in this kitty goes to this cannot be a problem for anyone to resolve. If I have said it, I said it last time when we were debating the policy on the budget, that if just creating ministries and taking money from here, taking jobs and responsibilities from this and giving it to another ministry and putting somebody there is governance, then my 17-year-old child at KNUST can do it.
Honorable, thank you. Comrade.
Well, to begin with, I think that to begin with, in the first submissions that we had, I did indicate that it would be foolish for anybody to expect President Mahama to, finance the elections when he's contesting. I believe the senior comrade wasn't comfortable with that. I didn't mean anything derogatory to any of the aspirants. Neither did I mean any derogatory to even His Excellency the President. So I was just looking at, it's illogical, frankly speaking, that if you expect President Mahama to pay for an elections that is going to be contested by the people, I think that everybody has a role to play. And that was the spirit with which I made that. So I never meant anything derogatory to any of the aspirants. So I sincerely apologize if anybody thinks that it was a bit derogatory. Absolutely far from that. And I believe that my brother will be comfortable that I never meant anything derogatory to his. I just feel that it's absolutely not logical that you expect him to pay money for people who would contest him. Maybe one would stretch it and say that as social democracy could do that, but he could only do that when others will not be able to afford. But I believe that all those who are contesting may be able to afford. So I sincerely apologize for that. The issue of energy crisis didn't start today. We were largely dependent on hydro. And thanks to Osajifo Dr. Kwame Nkrumah for the Akusumbo Dam that we had. Remember that even the construction of the dam, the construction of the Tema Motorway and others were opposed by the very people who are now having the opportunity to rule this country today. It was commissioned in 1965, and a year after its commissioning, they overthrew him. So I believe that at the time when Nkrumah was commissioned, remember that he had part of the funding from the U.S. government. And that is why I have always said that one cannot just be an absolute leftist or absolute rightist. Nkrumah was a pragmatic political phenomenon, the extent to which he felt that if there was a need for him to tap from even political adversaries at that time to be able to improve the living conditions of his people by generating the needed, energy for industrialization and for domestic use. Nkrumah didn't say that because ideologically he was diametrically opposed to what the U.S. at that time believed in and still believed in, but he saw the need to look beyond just his ideological position, but what will benefit the people of this country. So, which was commissioned 65, and we had eagerly depended on it until we began looking at thermal. Let us also be reminded that the issue of intermittent, because it seems to me that the current incompetent Minister for Energy is now saying that we are not experiencing dumso, that we are experiencing intermittent power supply. And I thought that the dumso was just a local, expression of what intermittent power supply is. In 1983 up to 88, we had experienced some, if you like, dumso. For the betterment or for the benefit of this discussion, I would want to use the dumso. We also experienced it between 1998 to 2000. So if you observe that we experience it almost every 10 years, we would experience the dumso. When MPP came into power, 2006, later part of 2005, 2006 to 2007, we had experienced dumso. So if you check, it is also about a period of 2 to 3 years. Of course, we experienced it in 2006 to 2005, later part 2006, 2007. Under the NDC again in 2012, we experienced it again. So if you observed, between 2006 up to that time, you are having a period of another 10 years. So it seemed to me that we experienced dumso every 10 years. The difference between what President Muhammad did and the experiences we have had in the past was that we could no longer, chatter that part any longer, and that there was the need for some permanent solution to be found to the energy crisis. And I remember at that time, there were people who were absolutely uncomfortable with the way President Mahama, desired to ensure that we had a permanent solution to the energy crisis. People, and many people, I can tell you, and admittedly, there were a lot of people within even government who felt that we should just also find a solution to it, that knee-jerk or ad hoc solution. And the point is that we have ad hoc solution to it, and the next 10 years, we're bound to experience that again. President Mahama stood his grounds against even the position of certain people within his government, and also NDC faithfuls who felt that it was dragging too long. Now, if you wanted to find a solution permanently to the problem, it certainly would have dragged too long. Even with that, it traveled within a period of 3 years. It wasn't even up to 4 years or even 5 years, as the MPP wanted the people of this country to believe. We had realized that there was a problem of capacity to generate. We also realized that there was a problem of transmission. We also realized there was a problem of distribution. And of course, the fuel to be able to, the crude to be able to panel those thermal, generators to be able to generate this was also a factor. There was also indebtedness. I mean, the indebtedness, which was never something the NDC started, the indebtedness that had been there for a very long time, particularly those who were in the business of delivering some of these services. In fact, it's just been reported that ECG, the first half of 2018, incurred a debt of 1 billion Ghana cedis. First half of, that is 6 months of 2018. What it means is that if we want to go by that, I believe by the ending of December 2018, they could have incurred a debt of 2 billion. And this has always been. Several steps were taken by the NDC to ensure that we had solution to this. But you see, but the impression is created, or it was created as if dumso just happened under President Mahama, and that we have never experienced dumso in the history of this country. And that is why I just wanted to put to perspective that we have experienced this every other 10 years. But the question is that if President Mahama delayed in ensuring that we found a permanent solution to it, why are we experiencing dumso today? Let me also state that in 2016, we never had a single power shedding. In 2016, not a single. As a matter of fact, by December 2015, President Mahama and the NDC had ended dumso. The dumso was not just ended, but there were certain pragmatic steps that were taken, some huge investment in the area to be able to solve some of the problems. Interestingly, President Nana Addo, sometime October 2018, or was it September 2000? No, 2017, when he went to commission a 20 megawatt solar, at what's the name of the place? Central Region, Gomwa. A project that was started by President Mahama, executed by the NDC. He went to recommission, shamelessly, a project that indeed had started, completed, and he went to recommission that, because clearly, if he was sitting idle, he didn't have anything to show. He needed to do it. And for me, it was taking our political discourse to another level, because clearly, this is something you shouldn't do. If it was something that was started and you completed, commissioning it would make a lot of sense. But you don't go and recommission something that was started and commissioned 2 years, earlier. And I think that for me, that was another desperate attempt. Again, in October 2018, the president at a ceremony to inaugurate the 225 kV, transmission here, so that we could sell energy to our neighboring countries. And this was something that we have been engaged in over 10 years. When the president went there, the president claimed credit, one, for that project he had no business whatsoever doing. This was something that was started and completed when you came into office. He didn't see the need to give credit to President Mahama. He also peddled another falsehood, and for me, it's becoming legendary for this president. He went there and claimed that it is only under his administration that we started exporting, if you like, electricity, energy to our neighboring countries, something that has been in existence for almost 10 years. It is also important for us to understand that as part of the means by the NDC administration to solve this problem and to ensure that we build our capacity so that we don't need to have challenges, let's look at what was the capacity of our generation that the NDC inherited in 2008. By 2008, the only the generation capacity that we had as a country was 1,935 megawatts. And we needed about almost 2,000 plus to be able to take care of even our domestic needs as a people. So what it means is that by the time the NDC took over from the MPP, we didn't have the capacity to generate energy to be able to take care of our domestic needs. But by the time the NDC left office in 2016, we had increased it from 1,935 to 4,132. 4,132. And if you permit me, we have car power, which we added 450 megawatts. We added about 200 megawatts for Kpong Thermal Power Project. That is what they call the KTPP. We had added 360 megawatts for Asogli. We had added 20 megawatts for BXC Solar Project, 250 megawatts for Ameri. Of course, the Ameri that they touted and said the NDC was corrupt. We had engaged in a lot of thievery. When they came, what did they do? They spend the taxpayers' money, and I think that some people should be prosecuted for causing financial loss to the state. They knew that they were spending money for a project that indeed didn't have any benefit whatsoever. And at the end of the day, they had to admit. And part of the reasons why we are going through this, I'll come to that, because it has to do with the inability and the arrogant posture of the government that they were not going to pay the indebtedness of government to Ameri. And the indebtedness occasioned, because when they came to power, they said that they were not going to pay. They had informed everybody in this country that the Ameri was even President Mahama who went into raid, and that we had stolen a lot of money. 250 megawatts on AXA that we did, 50 megawatts on the Trojan project, and many others. So it is palpable. And just less than 2 weeks ago, the Minister for Energy on one of the TV stations admitted that they haven't added a scintilla of energy to our capacity need. He had indicated that. By December 2015, like I said, the NDC didn't just end doom so. We had actually indeed ended some of the challenges and increased the capacity. And that explained why by 2016 we didn't have a single, if you like, load shedding. So for President to be taking credit for something that they haven't done, for me, I think that is extremely worrying. If you look at the gas processing plant, the Atobo gas processing plant, today they supply about 70%, in fact, more than 75% of the gas needs for our thermal plant. More than 75%. Now the question then is that if they can supply more than 75% of our gas needs, why do we still have these problems? The problem is simple. Indebtedness to some of these companies, indebtedness that were occasioned by the reckless conduct of this government, because they came and they said that they were not going to pay Ameri. And so if you don't pay Ameri, of course, they provide about 250 megawatts. What will they do? They also delay in doing that. Indebtedness to the Nigeria for the supply of gas to us, because as a matter of fact, if you listen to ASEP, an organization in which the current minister was one of the directors, and the current deputy minister, my teacher and a brother, Adam Muhammad Amin, Anta Doctor, he was the chief executive of ASEP, and they had indicated that the problems we were facing in the energy sector had got nothing to do with capacity, and they said that those facilities were standing idle, that it had to do with money. As a matter of fact, all the propositions, the things they said laudably and felt that that could serve only as a panacea to the problems of our energy crisis. Thank God, you know, karma is a beast. Thank God today that the two of them who were at ASEP, who were hiding behind a civil society group and doing MPP politicking, they are those who are now the managers of our energy sector today. Why is it that they are not bringing to fore some of these laudable, so-called laudable ideas they prefer on the issues of solving the energy crisis that we have in this country? It is also important for us to understand that the NDC didn't just increase our capacity and expand the infrastructure to facilitate effective distribution of energy. The NDC also expanded accessibility to electricity. Access. In fact, by 2008, when the NDC took over from the NPP, only 54% of the people of this country enjoyed electricity. Only 54% in this country. And I'll tell you, in Nantong constituency, within the period of 4 years I was the MP, I facilitated the expansion of rural electrification to 47 communities. And you know how incompetent these guys are. The other 17 communities that were left, which we started, some of them were at different stages of completion. Not a single community has this government and the current MPP MP for the constituency has been able to do. The previous MPP's MP from whom I won the elections did absolutely nothing. So the point we are just making is that we didn't just do it, we expanded it to 82%, and Ghana is next to only South Africa. In the sub-Saharan Africa, Ghana is next. So if we inherited it 54% coverage and we have increased it up to 82%, and we are only next to South Africa in terms of accessibility to electricity. I mean, this is a feat that this government must acknowledge. Why are we having some of these challenges that we haven't? We're having those challenges because you have a president who came out with utopian ideas. He came out with policies that he proposed that were not well thought through. He came out with policies that were just to satisfy his uncontrollable ego. It wasn't even about satisfying the NPP's interest. Nobody denies the fact that free education is supposed to be a right. As a matter of fact, every political party acknowledges the fact that we need to have a free education. But the simple question is that, must we just have a free education that denies quality education? Or we just want to have a free education because the king, whose whims and caprices upon which this country is being governed, made that promise, and therefore the promise ought to be fulfilled. Now, what we are experiencing today is not just free education, we are experiencing just free education without inequality. And I really don't think that any of the ministers in this government will subject their case to these uncontrollable, dehumanizing conditions under which people are supposed to learn. It doesn't also make sense that you have a government that says that we would have to take money from the oil or from the energy sector, we would refuse paying these service providers, and we would use the money to pay allowances of nursing trainee and teacher trainees. And the consequences of it is that we are not just paying those allowances, we pay the allowances with quota system. That, look, nursing trainees don't admit to capacity. We want you to reduce the number of nursing trainees that you are going to admit into your schools. Because if you admit up to capacity, we will not be able to pay. Now, they are creating a lot of havoc for this country in two fronts. One, they are denying several young people who otherwise would have gained admission into these nursing and teacher training institutions. They are denying them the opportunity because if Kolebu, for example, and I said this on this program, Kolebu has the capacity to admit not less than 300 students a year. Last year, you know what they did? They asked them to admit only 96. And out of the 96, Honorable Nilanti, what they did was that they asked every single student to pay for form. They paid for forms. They invited all of them to participate in the interview. Not that they shortlisted. Once you apply for admission, they will invite you for interview. They were inviting not to see and get the best ones. They were inviting because the Ministry of Health had asked them to generate money internally to run the schools. So all the students they invited for interview, they all had to pay 100 Ghana cedis. So if 10,000 students bought the forms, all the 10,000 students will be invited for interview. And when they invite them, you are all supposed to pay 100 Ghana cedis. And 100 Ghana cedis payment is not a guarantee for you getting admission. So they knew that they could not admit all the 10,000 students or 7,000 students, but they were inviting all of them and asking all of them to pay the money, non-refundable 100 Ghana cedis. So multiply 100 by even 10,000 or even 7,000. You can imagine the exploitation that Kolebu Nursing Training College did and all the nursing training colleges across the country, because this was a promise the government made. And to sum up on this, the Ghana nurses and midwifery, council, they hold their annual conferences every year. In 2017, specifically 24th February 2017, they held their conference in Kufuridua and indicated that we had a deficit of 38,000 nurses in this country. So what it means is that we needed 38,000 more nurses to be able to meet the WHO standard. Now, even with this in 2017, okay, some naturally will die, as we all die one day. Some will retire. Some would even leave the profession. So that is just the rough estimate. Yet juxtapose the admission into nursing training colleges in 2016 with the admission into nursing training colleges in 2017. There was a reduction by 1,600. Multiply the 1,600 by 4. So inshallah, by the next 4 years, when the good people of this country booted out the super incompetent and super corrupt government out, they would have denied us the services of additional 6,400 nurses. If you want to assume that the 38,000 deficit is even constant, and the 1,600 is constant each year, multiply that by 4 to give you 6,400 nurses. Add the 6,000 by the 38,000, that will give you how many? 44,600. That is what they are doing to health delivery in this country, in areas that we don't even have nurses. It's the same thing to teacher trainees. Now the irony is that you are denying the provision of energy. We have gone back to Dumso because you made promises that can only be explained by only you, not even your government, not even your ministers. And you are denying us energy and frequent energy supply because you are implementing a policy that you have given them quota. There is a reduction in the admission into teacher training colleges, because if they admit up to capacity, you'll not be able to pay them the allowances. At the same time, you are implementing a free SHS, which you yourself have boasted time and again that numbers of admission into those schools have increased. Now, it means that you are increasing the number of intake into schools, yet you are reducing the quality of teachers who will be teaching them. So it's a simple logic of garbage in, garbage out. So what people need to understand is not just about we have restored teacher trainee allowances, we have restored nursing trainee allowances, but we are looking at both the intended and the unintended consequences on quality of education, on health delivery, and that is the havoc. So that is why I said the issue of the NDC dues and the NDC's election, it has got nothing much to do with NDC as a political party. It has to do with the liberation of this country. We are all under captivity by the King Nana. He rules this country by only his whims and caprices. That is how this country is being ruled. So people need to understand that, particularly those of us in NDC. I don't necessarily, Senna, I don't necessarily need to like you to be able to work with you. So if you ask me, I would say that Honorable Nilanti, Comrade Nilanti, I would suggest that
they should not disqualify any candidate. Let all the candidates go in for the elections, and let's see the smoothness level of everybody. For me, it deepens the electoral process and democracy, because if you already disqualify someone who certainly, by every indication, can't win the elections, that person would have something to say. That but for the disqualification, I would have won. But for the disqualification, the NDC is not seen to be democratic. I think that they should allow all the candidates to. But Niza, you guys must have to look for the 420,000 Ghana cedis to pay as social democratic principles demands.
Thanks for mentioning his name for me, because he comes next.
All right, so I am no expert in this energy sector, but as a citizen, I do have some views, and as someone who is affected by some of these things, I have a few thoughts. And I think the first one is, for anyone who is not an expert in this field, right, listening to the conversation sometimes can get confusing, because the conversation has been clouded by so much partisanship, right, that it's difficult to basically understand what are the key issues and what are the things that we need to address in order to address the issue of energy management in this country, and to view it more as a national problem that we need to resolve, rather than an issue of party A did this and party B did this, right? And this deep partisanship actually prevents us from also understanding or being able to discuss the collaborations that take place, because I'm sure Dumso wasn't solved by Nana Addo, right? There was a lot of investment that was done until he came around, and also perhaps contributed to ensuring that we have some amount of energy supply. In fact, I mean, since the time of Rawlings to date, every government must have added not only to the capacity but also to policy and other things that would improve our energy sector. Right. We need to be able to understand these, devoid of politics, devoid of partisanships, and be able to understand how do we move the conversation to ensuring that Ghanaians have reliable energy supply. Now, if we're able to move it beyond the partisanship that today clouds the conversation, we may be able to see a number of things, right? So, for instance, today we are saying there's Dumso. Somebody says there's no Dumso, right? The issue, the reason why this is, and what the effect, right, or the person that this affects is the ordinary citizen and the entrepreneur who is not able to plan, because politicians are having a conversation and preventing this person from understanding, is there intermittent power supply, is there Dumso, how do I need to plan to ensure that I have energy to do the productions that I need to do, right? So the partisanship, number one, affects the ordinary person, because it affects the level of transparency within the discussion. People are no more willing to admit if there's how do you call it, Dumso or whatever you call it, and because of that we cannot plan, right? The level of partisanship prevents us from understanding clearly how much indebtedness exists within this this sector. Because everybody does admit that the level of indebtedness in this sector is part of the reason why we are facing these problems. And it's part of the reason why the sector has been so susceptible to all the shocks, so the slightest increase in fuel prices, everything goes haywire, right? We need to understand it. What are the issues at play, and how do we resolve that indebtedness, right? We need to also understand, and if you have any form of supply chain, any value chain, where players within the value chain are dissatisfied, as you see, especially within the energy sector, of course you are going to have problems, right? Because today you keep talking about, well, there are a number of players within the industry who are not getting paid, right? They supply to the industry, they are not getting paid. Of course, they are going to pull back, and that also affects it. And finally, and this is good. This is an interesting thing. If we have a certain level of transparency within the conversation, okay, perhaps we might also be able to discern the crisis capitalism that takes place within the system, where managers intentionally cause crisis to ensure that they can justify the sale of our resources and our assets to themselves and to their cronies. We may be able to see it if we're able to take out that partisanship within the conversation. Now, another thing I'll add here is I work with a number of entrepreneurs, and one of the areas that we look at is renewable energy. Okay. And what I see... Well, no, I'm not an expert in. I work with entrepreneurs, so I help them with planning their businesses. I'm not an expert in this. But the conversation that I continue to hear is how much renewable energy could actually contribute to helping us with our energy problems. Right. Today, my understanding is it contributes less than 1% of our energy mix, but it could actually be significantly more. And the Renewable Energy Act actually stipulates that by 2020, the contribution of renewable energy should, be about 10%, or the contribution should be about 10%, something of that sort. Unfortunately, if you speak to any of the players, what they'll tell you is the regulators in the sector are not doing anything to advance this. In fact, what you find is regulators in the sector are putting impediments in the way of people who are advancing the cost of renewable energy and who are helping to ensure that we don't depend so much on these old sources of energy like fossil fuel and move to newer sources of energy. But you see, mind you, the conversations we've been having have all been focused on old forms of energy. Like we are talking about fossil fuels, we are talking about generators, the world has moved on. We need to advance the conversation. You go to places like UK, they are thinking about how do we phase out, how do we phase out vehicles that depend on fossil fuel? How do we ensure that by 2020, every vehicle that's produced here or every vehicle that is imported into that country is reliant on electricity, it's an electric car, right? No more depends on these old forms of energy. We need to ensure that we don't stay within this conversation for years to come, and tomorrow our children will wake up one day and see the world has completely moved on, and what we consider to be our source of energy that no more exists. And that's what I think, as someone who is not an expert in this field, needs to happen.
Nasa, thank you very much. And Mr. Pratt?
Well, look, I have said repeatedly, that you don't have a problem with generation capacity. If you don't have a problem with generation capacity, the only cause of the problem can be fuel or the cost of it. Now, over the last maybe 18 years, I've been looking at the energy sector. And it seems to me that the biggest problem there has to do with the indebtedness of the power companies. And the indebtedness right now, at my last check, we are looking at something like $2.8 billion indebtedness. And the impression which sometimes is given that this level of indebtedness is only recent and so on is false. I look at the indebtedness of the power sector when Kufuor was in power. And at that time, the Volta River Authority alone had a total level of indebtedness of about $80 million, dollars. So it's an old problem. It is because of this problem that this energy sector levy was introduced. And at the time, it was believed that by 2021, we would have managed to get rid of the energy sector debt. We would start on a clean sheet and so on. It is this monies that are accumulating as a result of the imposition of the energy sector levy, which have been used in order to guarantee the bond, one of the bonds that we went and got, and so on. And the debt is growing. The energy sector debt is growing. You understand? Now I'm told, from what I've heard, some of the independent power producers are having to cut down on the levels of production because they simply cannot afford it. I mean, we are not paying them. That's the problem. You understand? What is even more annoying is the fact that the lies just go on and off and so on. And the impression I have is that we are not scheduling, we are not properly scheduling it because government does not want to create the impression that we've gone back to do so. So sometimes you are there, the light goes off for 2 hours, then it comes on for 30 minutes, and then it goes off again for 3 hours, and so on. It is unplanned, it's unscheduled, it's destroying people's equipment, it's destroying people's businesses, and so on. You know, I mean, where I live, most of the time the light goes on in the night. So by 9, 10, it goes off and comes back sometimes, you know, at dawn. You know, I mean, where I work, it's terrible. I mean, the work depends on power. We depend on power. Everything depends on power. You need to keep on the air conditioners and so on. You understand? And it just goes, pew, it's off, you know, and so on. And we've had to spend a lot of the money that we don't have on buying fuel in order to power a genset, you know. I'm talking about the Abelimpe area. It's crazy, completely crazy. So look, this whole business about reducing everything to political propaganda and so on, we should stop it. The people of this country need to know exactly what is wrong in the energy sector or the power sector. The people of this country need to know what is being planned, you know, and we need to be told when power is going to go off and when power is going to come on, so that we can plan our lives. And what is happening now is completely crazy, absolutely crazy. Now, I heard my friend and comrade talking about renewable sources of energy and so on. This is a debate we've had for a long time. Right now, that is not the problem. Because we have 2 times the capacity that we need. You know, we have 2 times the capacity that we need. We have so much, I mean, generation capacity is so big now that we should not be having this problem. But you know something which is very interesting? I mean, the problem got worse when the Minister of Finance went to Parliament and claimed that it is his government that put an end to Dumso. I mean, 2-3 days later, I mean, everything just went haywire. You know, as if to expose him and so on. But in fact, this is not the time for exposures. I mean, if you expose him, what do you get? If you expose him, what do you get? It's not about who did well and who didn't do well and so on. We have a problem on our hands now. The energy sector is sinking, and it is sinking because of indebtedness. And somebody needs to do something about it. And the only person who controls the national purse, the people that we pay our taxes to, is the current administration. And the current administration need to do something about the energy sector debt. It's killing us.
Mr. Brown, maybe we still have time for some short comments on our last topic. That has to do with the Supreme Court decision on the creation of a new region. So you can start for us.
Well, we have said that when it comes to the interpretation of the Constitution and so on, we should go to the Supreme Court, and that we should live with the decisions of the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has decided, it's a unanimous decision by 7 judges who sat on the case and so on. In fact, if I had the means and I was involved in the case, I would have gone for a review. If I had the means, I mean, go for a review and let's see what the other judges think, you know. And the reason why I would have gone for a review is simply this. I mean, and everybody knows this. And this is not to take anything away from the judges and so on. But all of us know that how you empanel the court can predetermine outcomes. We know that. All over the world, that is known. In the United States, the orientation of judges are known. And when it comes to abortion cases, you know what position one judge would take as against the other and so on. So these are known. I mean, the recent appointment to the U.S. Supreme Court, the heat it generated and so on, because people knew his orientation. And it became a ding-dong battle between the Republicans and the Democrats and so on. The same situation exists everywhere in the world. Judges are human beings like us. They are judges whose orientation is progressive, and there are judges whose orientation is reactionary. There are judges, who may be socialist inclined, and there are judges who can actually be fascist and so on. You understand? And that is why when you get to the level of the Supreme Court, you have so many judges sitting on a particular case. Because it is believed that the larger the number of judges, the more different orientations are expressed and so on. So I believe very strongly that if we went beyond the 7 judges, we may not get a unanimous decision. At least it is possible to get 1, 2, or 3 others who may disagree with the 7 judges, and it may help us think through this referenda, properly and so on. Now, when I heard the judgment, I was very deeply worried, because if you take the Volta region, for example, what is happening there is serious. First of all, you have sections of the region which agree that the region needs to be divided. And you have large sections of the region which also believe that it should not be divided. You understand? And they are all active and campaigning. They involve some of the most prominent citizens of the region. Indeed, on the side of those who believe that the region should be divided, a new region should be created out of Volta region, for example, is someone like Dr. Obeda Samoa, who is very active in that campaign and so on. If you look on the other side, they are equally they're heavyweights on the other side. Tobe Afediaso and others are on the other side and so on. You understand? So it is not to be taken lightly. But then on top of all this, it's also the secessionist movement which has emerged in the region. We should be very, very careful in order not to create a sense of exclusion. We should be very, very careful so that in the end, everybody in the region will feel that they contributed to making that decision. The decision of the Supreme Court limiting those who will take part in the referendum to only those in the affected places which are supposed to be removed from the region, I think is not the best under the circumstances. Now, when I say this, I'm not saying this to question the capacity of the court. The court does have the capacity to make the decision. But I think that in making this decision, some other factors have not been taken into account. In any case, when I read what the newspapers reported, I haven't read the full judgment, I got the impression that the matter was determined on a technicality. For example, I get the impression that the judges were of the view that their powers to interpret the Constitution had not been properly invoked in the process. That's a bit strange to me, given the fact that the Supreme Court is in a position to make its own rules and to change its rules, therefore, and so on. You understand? So we ought to be a little more careful. I mean, if you look at the northern region, there are so many contestations in that region. First and foremost, all the ethnic groups are insisting that they should not be divided. You understand? I mean, the Gomba people are saying that, look, they want to be in one region. There's no reason why they should be divided, and so on. How are you able to do that? And I've seen a very lengthy, probably very well thought out statement put out by the Kukumba Youth Association, who are raising all kinds of issues with regards to this demarcation and so on. Then on top of all of this, are issues about the murder of the Yana and so on. I mean, we are told that everything is fine. You know, I saw the presentation of the report of the committee to the president in the Flagstaff House and so on, and we are told that everything is fine. But I'm talking to people on the ground and everything is not fine. You understand? And I'm shocked that last week or so, we paraded policemen and security armed people in the streets in the hope that it would intimidate the people. This is the most reckless act. You cannot intimidate the people there. You can't intimidate them. I mean, people do not understand the cultural practices in those areas and so on. I mean, you know better than me, you know. Look, you can bring people armed with torpedoes and bazookas and so on. When the jam is played, nobody will be afraid of a bazooka. So that exercise was so useless and reckless. You think that you go and parade people in the streets, that we are ready to fight. You know, we are going to organize the funerals anyway. If you don't agree, we'll meet you blow to blow and so on. And you think you can intimidate those people? I think it is important for us to engage all the different people with different views on the issue. The process of engagement is not over. Rather than intimidate the people, it is important for government to sit down with all the different sections and have a dialogue, try and convince people about the way forward and so on. I'm just wondering, you know, we belong to the economic community of West African states. And sometimes it is possible for us to engage others in the sub-region in the resolution of the problems that confront us. Indeed, if you look at the Togo crisis, the opposition has been constantly consulting the president of Ghana. And last week, the president of Togo came here to consult the president of Ghana and so on. So sometimes we can look beyond our boundaries and so on. If you're looking for a traditional ruler to help resolve this problem, perhaps we should have looked up to Burkina Faso. You understand? And I know what I'm talking about. I mean, everybody who comes from the northern region knows what I'm talking about. Because it's one kinship who spreads into Burkina Faso. And the chief of the Moshis is regarded as part of the Dagomba people and so on. You understand? Because there are all kinds of problems with the choices that we make and so on, you know. I honestly and sincerely pray for peace everywhere in the country, not just in Dagbon, not just in the northern region, but everywhere in the country. I know what I'm talking about. I mean, a couple of years ago, about 10, 12 years ago, the Socialist Forum of Ghana, to which I belong, did a survey around this country. In fact, the survey was led by Mr. Trikri Opoku. And the survey concluded that there were 200 hotspots in this country waiting to explode. 200. And these hotspots were places where we had chieftaincy disputes, we had land disputes, and so on. We categorized all of them. My brother, to my surprise, 2 weeks ago, somebody else did a survey and came out, and these flashpoints had increased from 200 to about 900 and something. So you have all these flashpoints. And it is this period that we are going to use to break up regions and so on. For what purpose? This is also the period where we are using to create new districts. And sometimes I wonder, if you look at the creation of the new districts, it has no bearing on the attempt to create new regions. No bearing. Yeah. You know, one would have thought that while we are separating the regions and so on, a lot more effort would have gone into creating more districts there and so on. It has nothing to do with that. And then people are raising legitimate questions, for example, about how come that some regions appear to be intact. And then we are told that, oh, you have to write an appeal petition, and that is simply because those regions have not written petitions. You know, the demarcation of the country into regions and districts and so on must be rational. It must have a rational basis. It is just based on petitions, that if you petition, then fine. And especially now that we've come to a conclusion that if you petition, only the petitioners will vote in the determination. Then tomorrow morning, Apam, Abura, Gomua, and Gomua affected, those people there can come and petition the president that they want to become a region. And they are the only people who will vote in the determination of whether we should have a region or not. So the central region can end up having 20 other regions. If you adopt this method that the Supreme Court appears to have blessed, where is it going to end? Okay. You understand? Ghana is a very small landmass with a very small population. In fact, the population of the whole of Ghana is sometimes, if you compare to other cities, maybe 50% of one city in the world and so on. And we are busy dividing. Where is it going to end? And then we are told that we are dividing so that we can develop infrastructure. What nonsense is that? I mean, if you don't break the regions up, you cannot construct roads. Where is that logic coming from? And this process appears to have been blessed by the Supreme Court. Well, they have the power so to do. I don't have that power. If I had that power, I would not bless this process. But unfortunately, in our constitutional dispensation, people like me don't have the power. That power is vested in the Supreme Court. And 7 judges of the Supreme Court have blessed this process, which is problematic.
Thank you, Mr. Prado.
No, I just want to say briefly that I agree with Uncle Kwesi entirely, that if you look at particularly the Moli, the Gumba people, in fact, it even extends to Wa, that the Gumbas have some lineage with the Wala and the Upper West region. They have some lineage. In fact, the Nairi is supposed to be the big brother to the Yana. They were of the same brothers, and their sister was the one who went intermarried, and then they founded the Musi Kingdom. So you look at the Bimbilana, the Yana, and the Nairi are supposed to be one, children of one father. And their senior sister was Mantambo, who went to Burkina, intermarried, and then the Musi Kingdom was formed. That's why the Gumbes, Mamprisis, and the Numbes are all playmates to the Moses. Even Wala are also playmates because there's that lineage. There's also a lineage between the Gbang and the Asante Kingdom, and it has got nothing to do with this kind of lineage. But some centuries ago, there was some collaboration, which Professor Eliasu described as economic symbiosis, when he questioned the historical narration that the Gumbes were defeated by Asantes in 1770. Professor Eliasu asked a simple question: if they were defeated, where was the battle fought? And he went ahead to say that the Gumbes and Asantes never fought. They had economic symbiosis. There was some collaboration. So there is some relationship the Gumbes and Asantes have, which is tremendous. So even if you go to Dagbang, the Kamon Tuhandama, that is the warriors, they don't bear the Gumba names. They bear Kojo, Kofi, and others. So there is that. So I agree that yes, we could be looking at else. But my view about this region creation, you have the Gumbes who held a press conference, actually addressed by the Kampa Kwayana. And in that press conference, it wasn't about Andani or Abudu. All the Dagbang sons and daughters, the chiefs were present in that press conference. And it had to do with Cherponi. And in the Konkombes were also there. The Dagbang kingdom position is that Cherponi should not be taken out of the northern region. Mm-hmm. Because apparently there was some communication between the Nairi and the Kampa Kwayana over Cherponi. That relationship can never break. However, once at that level there is consensus about it, I thought that the commission should have listened to them. There is nothing wrong if, like Kwesi said, government wants to create regions. But the point is that must you create a region that would lead to a division and the destruction of the cultural heritage of the people? Now, the moment people raise those concerns, 3 districts, 4 districts, you can have a region. And it seems to me that even petition that was made was unheeded too. Nobody even had the decency to respond to the petition that was submitted by the Gumbes through the Kampa Kwayana to the government. They didn't listen to that petition. And I think that, for me, it's extremely worrying. What we need in northern Ghana, particularly in Dagbang, is peace, unity, and harmony. We have seen how it has affected us economically, socially, culturally, the extent to which many of our friends here is just the intersectionality. Many people think that once you are working, you are posted to northern region, then you are posted to hell. Few of them will go there and realize that that is where you can make do with the little money that you have. So I think that government has a huge responsibility. Part of rules and regulation covering the conduct of creating regions
proper and wider consultations ought to be done. It seemed to me that these consultations were not done, because if they were done as we are being made to believe by government, I don't think that you would have these traditional authorities holding press conferences and saying that we disagree to this. There is the need for some consensus, and I agree absolutely with Uncle Kwesi that, look, it is still not late, that consensus building, but this attitude of like Tamale was virtually like a Gaza Strip, and the Minister for Defense ought to know that is his region. When you do that, you anger people even the more. And I really don't think that it argues well. Consensus building is very important. Government can have a quiet diplomatic negotiations. That people cannot take transigent position. That if the Dagbang people are saying that we wouldn't want Cherpany to be taken out of our region, I think that we need to. And it has to do with ab initio, the creation of the regions were tilted towards ethnic positions. Okay, you have 3 or 4 kingdoms. This kingdom, through the paramountcy or leadership, says that we want to have our region. These people say they want to have our region, and for me, that occasions some of these problems. So government ought to listen to people, properly. And I really don't think that it argues. Nobody would be against any demarcation or a reduction. How can you tell me that you created more districts in Ashanti region and Eastern region? You are not dividing any of the regions. Volta region, initial list that came out, not a single district was created. When people made noise, they came out shamelessly and said they are creating another district. Now
they have not created; they've just laid them.
Exactly. I mean, it simply doesn't make sense. Must it be necessarily
asking that Anglo district should be created out of the kit?
And see now, even if you claim that people would have to petition. Now, if you also think that the focus and the purpose for the creation of the region is to facilitate infrastructure development, economic development, you don't necessarily need for someone from Ashanti or Eastern to ask you or petition before you do that. If you didn't feel that you need to create development and expand infrastructure, who told you? And where is the evidence that infrastructure in those regions are so absolute? They have some challenges. Do that. It is meant to disintegrate this country the more for political gerrymandering and nothing else. But the NPP ought to be reminded that in this country and under this 4th Republican Constitution, you had both the NDC and NPP in government at a point in time creating more constituencies. At the end of the day, the electoral results did not benefit even the government that created those constituencies. Check when the NPP created more constituencies, more districts and more constituencies. Check the electoral results as to how many of those areas they won, and check even when the NDC. Even if you win, it's just be 1 or 2 difference. And I really don't think that it argues well for our democracy.
Let me bring him. They will know that the agitation for the OT region is largely led by people who are NDC.
Absolutely.
How do you benefit from it?
Sena, it's interesting. Over the past week, in debating the budget on local government, I did make one point clear, and I made reference to the late Kofi Annan, who made a categorical statement that creation of regions is not a panacea to development. No. He made it clear, and I totally agree with him, because according to the analysis he made, if you have the same food basket and you have 4 children, if you decide to have 10 children from the same food basket, you only will create malnourishment for your children and not give them any good growth. You understand? So if Ghana's food basket, our revenue basket is the same, creating more regions will not necessarily bring development to those regions. In actual fact, what we are going to do is that we are further going to limit the development, because now you are going to spread your development thin on the ground. Instead of what you had could cover for 10 regions, now you have to use the same revenue base, the same basket you have of revenue to cater for 16 regions. You understand? So you are actually not going to effectively develop the country. So I made that analogy. And I also made the point that the Minister for Regional Integration had made a point that certain provisions have been made in the budget for the new regions. Wonderful. But let's ask ourselves, what is the percentage and the proportion of provisions made in the budget actually becoming releases? Didn't the budget, the minister budget 1 million for every constituency in the 2017 budget? Where was it? Was it released? 2018, it wasn't. You understand? So the mere fact that the provisions have been made in the budget does not necessarily mean that the regions will have this money. That is one. Two, I totally agree with people who have made that assertion the point that, look, why would you say you are creating regions? Because the regions are composed and compassed by districts. And the regions where you want to create the regions, you have not created new districts. And you are creating districts in the places where you don't want to create regions. Where are they going to get the money from? Because the districts are actually financed statutorily from the District Assembly's Common Fund. So once you create region, so in actual fact, what they are doing is secretly making more money available to those regions that are favorable to them. Ashanti region and Eastern region. Yeah. Create more regions and make more money come there. And rather deprive the regions that are not favorable to them, where they are further dismantling, deprive them of more money. Simple. Because I don't understand why a vast area like the Ashanti region, in terms of population and size, will not be created, will not be divided, and then you decide that you are dividing the brown half into three. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. In any way, it doesn't make sense. Yes. NDC as a party also having a manifesto division of the region. But we definitely, I don't think we would have done it the way they are doing it. Two, with a little
no, I hope that's your last point. We are way past our time. We just wanted.
Okay, I didn't know that. And then I want to say this. Look, just like Kwesi Pratt said, I totally do not think that the judgment of our learned, let me say, judges of the Supreme Court sits with me, because what they actually judged on was procedural, was the technical issue of the invitation of their original jurisdiction. But the substantive issue is whether the minister and the government is acting in consonance with the Constitution. Because the Constitution says that when you are creating regions, you understand, the referendum must be in the regions affected, in the areas affected. As at now, as we sit by law, those new regions are not in existence. So who are the people who are going to be affected? Those who are existed now are the people who are going to be affected, because these ones are not in existence, they are not created. They are now, you are now asking for the opportunity to create them. So those who are in existence are those who are going to be affected. Because if I have a land and you are taking part of my land, you should seek my permission. You don't just go and seek the permission of the person for whom you are taking my land for. You understand? This is the moral and the spirit behind the constitutional provision.
Okay.
So people just looking at the face at the letter of the constitution saying that because areas means this, that means that this area should be there. I think the judgment, to me, doesn't sit well with me.
Okay.
With the little knowledge I have.
Okay. That's all.
Okay, so I'll just make it very quick, because I know we are long past our time. First comments, just want to make a correction about the renewable energy issue. So I did not intend to say renewable energy is the solution today, right? But we have said that a big part of the problem today is the cost of fuel, right? Now we know today that when you look at the power consumptions in this country, about 53% of power consumption is done in residential areas. If you can move all residencies to renewable energy, you significantly save on fuel prices. And if you save on those fuel prices, you solve some of the problems that we have today. And of course, there are a few other issues that you resolve by then. So that's my quick comment on this. And just two quick comments on this issue about the new creation of the regions. First one, I am alarmed about the kind of conversations that I hear, right? Because it's beginning to seem like Ghana is degenerating into a society of chiefdoms, right? So every tribe wants its own region, and eventually we are going to now have every tribe having its own region and saying, well, I'm a different tribe from this, I also need. So we are building kingdoms within Ghana, which actually scares me. I mean, I thought the rationale for creating regions or administrative administrative regions should be based on something more rational than tribal divisions. So that's number one. And number two, I think the conversation needs to, we need to also take into consideration what is the unit of development from this country. Okay. If it is the districts, right, then the argument that new regions are going to create development then doesn't sit. Then what we need to do is, how do we improve our local governance system? How do we improve the decentralization process in order to ensure that the districts are performing the functions? If we think the districts are not performing that function well, and it's regions that are performing, then let's collapse the districts and create 20 regions or 30 regions and use that as a basis of development, as a unit of development in this country. And I think these are the conversations we should be having. I mean, I'm actually alarmed at the kind of conversations we're having today, which seems to be purely based on politics and based on tribal lines.
Thank you very much. You heard Abdul Nasser Alidu, is Communication Director for Guzitano 2020 campaign team. He is a lecturer and also a member of organizing for Ghana. And we also joined the studio by Comrade Murtala Ibrahim Mohammed, who is a former member of parliament for Nanto and former deputy minister of Trade and Industry, and also Honorable Edwin Nilante Vanderpoy, who is member of parliament for Dodo and former minister for youth and sports. We're also joined by Comrade Kwesi Pride Jr., who is the managing editor of the Inside newspaper. A big thank you to our sponsors, TT Brothers, Kulun Ghana Limited, Franco Trading, for the support. A big thank you to our partner stations across the country. We're live on the internet on RadioGold905.com. My name is Sana.
Like you've been told.